Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1378 of the War News stream. And we have very big news today. We have heard Ukraine attacked a third Russian-linked tanker near Turkey this time. Also, Putin has completely nuked the Ukraine peace talks today, in a shocking move, of course. And also, NATO is considering preemptive strikes on Russia. And you heard that right. Actually, preemptive strikes on Russia, believe it or not. And we have very big news tonight. It's good to see you all once again.
And of course, folks, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from quite literally practically every single region, as the Ukrainian armed forces have continued their attacks against the Russian Shadow Fleet, with their fourth vessel being hit over the course of the day. Apparently, the vessel is the Mid-Volga, which has been hit directly by aerial drones within the area of the Black Sea, taking significant damage to the superstructure, with the ship coming to a complete stop as the crew considered to possibly abandon ship due to the damage. Meanwhile, the Turkish company which operated the vessel, the Mersin, has confirmed that the vessel was actually hit by explosives apparently 4 times off the coast of Senegal, with the vessel now apparently sinking. The company which operated the Mersin is now stating that they will be halting any operations or activities with the Russian Federation due to the significant risk of collateral damage that could be faced due to continued economic cooperation. Basically, they're not going to be shipping Russian oil any longer. Outside of that, the Ukrainian armed forces have been continuing to hold the lines today, while in Moscow, it appears that the Russians are holding a line of their own, or more so towing a line, if you want to call it that, as the Russian Federation's government made it clear to the United States after a 5-hour rant about Rinky-Dink the Wise and all of the amazing attributes and skills of old Rinky-Dink that they were not going to be accepting the American peace plan under any circumstances and will only accept unconditional surrender by the Ukrainians and also unconditional terms accepted generally by the West as well. This has led the United States of America's delegation, including Witkoff, who appeared to be giddy with glee to meet Putin for about the second time, to go back to the United States of America largely disappointed in the fact that there's been absolutely no developments on that front. Meanwhile, the United States has generally been quiet over the course of the day about the absolute failure that's been seen in Moscow, once again in the diplomatic arena, but the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to fight on, with Lithuania and other countries within Europe continuing to make actions and preparations for a possible defense against a larger conflict that may occur in the future with the Russian Federation. Lithuania now deploying SHORADs near to their area of the border. Those are short-range air defense systems, along with Lithuania also filling out further purchase orders and contracts with European arms manufacturers for more air defense equipment. Meanwhile, inside of the NATO headquarters in Belgium, we've actually been able to hear that General Giuseppe of NATO has actually suggested that there is a possibility of NATO conducting preemptive strikes against the Russian Federation in a defense scenario. Although that does not exist under the NATO framework as a defensive scenario or anything that NATO would be sanctioned to do as a NATO-backed action, it does appear that Giuseppe believes that that is possible and is stating that they may conduct such an action. In turn, the Russian Federation has stated that those statements by General Giuseppe were incredibly provocative, and they're now threatening to obliterate the entirety of Europe as a response of the NATO general statements that were made just yesterday. Outside of that, the Russian Federation is also seeing that Vladimir Putin will be traveling to the Republic of India here soon to try and peddle oils and other wares of the Russian Federation, as they are once again quite strapped for cash. We understand that Putin will be visiting the Republic of India for several days, most likely in an attempt to encourage the Modi government to completely overlook the existing secondary sanctions that have been put against the Russian Federation, and to increase the amount of purchase orders from the Republic of India of Russian crude in an attempt to try and stabilize the failing Russian economy and the Russian federal budget, to be able to try and continue to finance the war and keep the economy alive for just a little bit longer. Outside of that, the United States of America has reiterated today through the President of the United States that strikes on land on Venezuela are coming incredibly soon. We've been hearing that for 90 days, by the way. We have also heard that at the same time, a significant flight of U.S. KC-135 and KC-46 Stratotankers was seen near to the Mexican-American border in Southern California today, while another equally large flight of P-8 Poseidons were also all flying to Southcom as well. Additionally, we have been able to hear that SEAL Team 6, or SEAL Team in general, has been involved in carrying out strikes against alleged narco-terrorist vessels within the area of the Eastern Caribbean, while at the same time, we're also hearing that there's apparently a pause on strikes currently, as they are not able to find enough boats to be able to conduct strikes on any farther. There is also a possibility that the strikes have been halted due to the war crime allegations that have been alleged at the moment for what is actually not a double tap but a quadruple tap, which was conducted by the U.S. Southcom Area of Responsibility around the time of early September. It has now been told and uncovered that the boat that was believed to have been hit twice, with survivors clinging onto the side of the vessel, was actually hit 4 times by 4 individual hellfires over the course of about 2 hours. Currently, the Congressional Armed Services Committee is investigating the situation as a potential war crime, and there is a belief that the strikes on further narco-terrorist vessels within the Eastern Caribbean is not being halted due to a lack of boats, but being halted due to the fact that there may be possible war crime allegations and charges being brought forward by the Congress here in the near future. Meanwhile, Colombia is actually trying to act tough right now, as the president of Colombia, Petro, has actually started to make these weird and incredibly hostile statements towards the United States of America for absolutely no reason at all, generally from what we understand. We also have been able to hear, meanwhile, that the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to hold their lines today. They have actually retaken ground within the Kupiansk battlefield, a significant amount within the southern area of the city, while at the same time the Russian Federation is continuing to take high losses along most other areas of the front. Suffice it to say, today is quite a significant day of news again, and we are going to be making sure to cover each and every single major piece of news that we have over just the past 48 hours alone. And of course, we're going to be working from our largest story first on into the smaller stories throughout the night. But I do have to also let you all know that I had to do a lot of trimming tonight on our news, so there are some smaller stories that had to be cut just due to the fact that we have so many large stories to cover from the course of the day. So moving us on into our first and most major piece of news for the day, the Ukrainian armed forces have struck and attacked their 4th shadow tanker vessel of the Russian Federation, and also the 3rd one, mind you all, within the area of the Black Sea. Over the course of the day, Ukrainian naval forces were able to hit and attack the Mid-Volga, a vessel inside the Black Sea, with video footage emerging showing the condition of the smaller oil tanker as it was apparently full stop inside of the area of the Black Sea. At the moment, we do not know exactly where the Mid-Volga was, but if we look at the video here towards the end and at the superstructure, we can clearly see visible fire damage and charring to the top of the Mid-Volga, which we do understand to generally be an actual Russian vessel. This ship was apparently attacked overnight by Ukrainian long-range drones, not of the naval variety. Interestingly enough, it actually were aerial-based drones, which is leading further to the credibility of the analysis that I made on air several days ago, that the Kairos and the Virat appear to have been initially hit by some form of Lyuti or other variant of Ukrainian long-range flying drones. Then later on, after the Ukrainians saw that the ships did take significant damage but did not sink, the vessels were then hit secondarily by actual naval-based drones, including the Magura drones, which are incredibly famous at this point in the war. We did see video and picture evidence as well emerging from the decks of the Mid-Volga 2, also showing us the actual damage that was caused from the explosion on the superstructure, and also the debris of a drone. It appears that it possibly may be a Lyuti, as Lyutis do have this very similar sort of fixed-wing gear configuration, or it may be that of an FP-1, which is incredibly similar to that of the Lyuti long-range drone. We can also see that the Ukrainians raised the roof, or put down the roof for the larger part, and it does appear quite obvious, at least for now, that the Ukrainians are now beginning a unending campaign at the moment against the Russian Shadow Fleet, and really any Russian vessels for that matter, that are involved in the transportations of any form of oils or gas. Most importantly, what is actually shocking, folks, is that we have been able to get an update on the situation involving the Mersin off of the coast of Senegal, which was hit on Sunday. Many of y'all will remember that there was a lot of questionability about what was happening with the vessel, let me get the name here, Mersin. I was about to call it the ricin, but I believe that's a poison. The Russians are generally a poison, though, so nothing different there. But the Mersin, as seen here, was apparently sinking on Sunday, and there was a decent amount of statements that were coming out from multiple different individuals stating that they knew exactly the cause and the reason why the vessel was taking on water and sinking. A decent amount of theories emerged that the Mersin was actually an old and decrepit tanker, and that the vessel was sinking due to the hull simply being in such bad shape that it apparently just started taking on water and sinking from the stern. Interestingly enough, from what we now understand, the company which actually operates the Mersin, which is apparently Besiktas Shipping, the Turkish owner of the oil tanker Mersin that was hit by 4 explosions off of Senegal on the 27th, announced it is ending all operations linked to Russia. The company said it has always complied with sanctions, but now considers regional security risks untenable for its vessels and crew. And so from this point forward, they will no longer be cooperating with the Russian Federation by economic means, which, with an oil tanker, there's obviously only one kind of cargo that can be carried, which is oil, which generally, from what we understand, is sanctioned to be transported by any vessel in the world, but nevertheless, the company is going to be stopping any cooperation with the Russian Federation from here on. Not only that, it also confirms that our analysis and information here on the channel was in fact accurate, and that the Mersin was not sinking due to poor repairs. It actually was sinking due to 4 individual explosions of an unknown type, either by naval drones or flying drones, striking the rear of the vessel near to the stern, leading the ship to take on water and then sink off of the coast of Senegal, from what we know. That means that that was the 3rd ship and the longest range ship that has been hit so far in the Ukrainian tanker war that's currently going on with the Russian Federation, with the 4th one taking minor damage today to its superstructure. It's incredibly clear at this point that the Ukrainian armed forces are going all in, at least at the moment, on trying to attack and destroy as many of the shadow tankers as they possibly can. And of course, considering that they've hit 4 in about the course of 3 days, they're averaging about 1 tanker hit and damaged or completely destroyed per day. That's actually a pretty good running number, considering that there aren't that many tankers in the world for that matter, and if the Ukrainians were able to destroy or knock out one of these ships every single day, they'd probably run out of Russian tankers to hit and destroy, probably within the next half year, or less than that for that matter, considering the amount of tankers that are currently working on evading sanctions for the Russian Federation. So with all this put together, it's looking like things are going to be going quite poorly. On top of that, we also understand that Erdogan of Turkey is now getting significantly worried over the issue. And while we cannot play the clip, Erdogan has stated that the war between Russia and Ukraine has reached Turkey's doorstep and the security of the entire Black Sea is at risk. The Turkish leader said after the attack on Russian tankers of the Shadow Fleet off of the coast. The Kairos and the Virat were blown up just a few kilometers from Turkey, and new Ukrainian underwater drones were used to strike the vessels, at least according to claims by Nexta, but we would generally understand that they were surface-based drones, considering that we got video and picture evidence of the surface-based drones being used several days ago, which I will once again show here just so that we can fact check that by showing the actual vessels as they were hitting the boats. So you can see in the clip right here that these are not submersible drones. These actually appear to be of the Magura variety that were used in the strikes, clearly showing that they were not submersibles. I don't know where that information came from at the moment, but they were non-submersible surface drones that were used to attack and finally sink the Kairos and the Virat after they were initially hit several times by Ukrainian long-range drones such as the Lyudi, which is an airborne-based drone. Now with all of this in the bigger picture, it does seem to be the case that even Erdogan is understanding that the war is entering a new phase, and one that actually might be a little bit crucial for the Turks at this point to get directly involved and intervene in some form or another. A lot of people are also talking about what's going to be happening next, now that it appears that the Black Sea is a dangerous place for Russian tankers in general. Any Russian tanker, or any tanker even having any business dealings with Russia, is apparently going to be attacked and destroyed, if possible, by the Ukrainians if they enter the Black Sea, with attacks also intermittently happening possibly around the entirety of the world against any ship, meaning generally that any vessel involved in the shadow tanker business right now could be at danger of losing the ship and maybe even some of its crew or all of the crew if they continue on with their actions of supporting the Russian Federation financially by transporting sanctioned oil. A lot of people are wondering what the Ukrainians are going to be doing next. And of course, considering that we're seeing a multi-day pattern here of them hitting and striking these oil tankers, I think the answer is fairly clear to a lot of people. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so remarkably, Ukraine's attacked a third oil tanker less than 100 miles away from the coast of Turkey, which is kind of crazy, actually. That's the third one that's been hit by the Ukrainian armed forces in just the last week or so. And obviously, this is a very big campaign, and it's got Turkey concerned. You heard that Erdogan is saying things now. And also, obviously, Putin's concerned about it, and they're once again threatening the Warhammer once again over the whole issue. So what happens next? 58% said Ukraine will likely expand the strikes to other vessels, while 28% said Russia will now attack the Ukrainian ships in response to this, and 7% said Turkey will likely respond to this themselves. So I'll be honest, I was telling the enforcer this before we started the stream. It sounds to me like Erdogan is starting to take a sort of hostile approach to this, and understandably so. This is happening less than 100 miles off the coast of Turkey, and even though it is in the Black Sea, targeting ships that are at least Russian linked in some way or another, at least transporting Russian oil, or at least allegedly, it looks like Turkey is getting very concerned because this is probably going to scare off a lot of other ships from docking in Turkey. So I don't think Turkey's going to respond to it directly. They may issue a protest over it, but they probably won't do anything directly to Ukraine over the issue. I would say the likely answer here is Russia will probably start trying to attack Ukrainian commercial vessels or any type of Ukrainian vessel that is doing any type of commerce with Ukraine. Russia probably will try to strike those next, even though clearly that would not be a legitimate target because they're commercial vessels carrying most often agricultural supplies. Russia will try to do that to even the playing field. So I'm actually with the 29%. I think that's what's coming next. And also at the same time, I know sadly people couldn't pick this as an option, but I think Ukraine will also expand the strikes as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I believe the Ukrainians are going to be expanding the strikes, considering the fact that this is probably going to end up being one of the most damaging effects that they can have on the Russian Federation at this point of the war. We do have to remember, folks, that the current front in Ukraine is not an incredibly mobile or flexible sort of a front line. It is pretty much set in place at this point, and any gain of ground by either side of any small amount is paid for in tremendous amounts of blood, generally meaning that it's incredibly difficult to see a frontline victory, a overwhelming frontline victory that would lead to a strategic defeat for Russia on the battlefield, or for the Russians to defeat the Ukrainians on the battlefield. So this means that they are going to have to move to more creative means, which they have been doing already for about the past year and a half, which is to conduct attacks against Russian oil refineries, completely depriving the Russian domestic markets of any usable amount of gasoline or diesel, or as they call it in Russia, benzene. Or, for that matter, the Ukrainians are also conducting attacks against the pipelines, gas loading facilities, and oil loading ports of the Russian Federation, with two of those, at least within Western Russia, being in the area of the Black Sea, which is Novorossiysk and Tuapse. Now, with the Ukrainians conducting the attack that they are right now, they are making it incredibly risky, if not completely pointless, for a vessel to even make the venture into the Black Sea to try and load up at either one of those ports with any Russian oil. Let's put this into perspective of we own a ship, and we are trying to evade sanctions to get to a port in Russia to load up with oil and then ship that somewhere in the world, to a place like India or China to make some money. So let's say we are the ones who operated the ship, the Merzen. So the Merzen would have to go through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles and make it into the Black Sea, where it is now running the gauntlet at that point, mind you all, to try and make it to a Russian port, because the Ukrainians could attack and sink the vessel at any given moment while it's making that journey. Then when it makes it to a port, it has to hope that the Ukrainians haven't attacked it recently, and also that the Russian repair teams were quick, because otherwise the oil loading ports, which this ship just took the incredibly dangerous venture to get to, aren't even running to load the ship with oil, meaning the ship is now bleeding money for the company that's running it because it isn't carrying cargo, which is the way that they make money. And on top of that, the ship is in an incredibly dangerous area and doesn't even have a chance of loading up with oil. So once that happens, the ship's either got to sit there and wait and possibly become the victim of a Ukrainian attack in the midst of waiting for the port to come online, which could take weeks, or it has to go back through the Black Sea on the long and arduous trip that most likely will be at least 2 to 3 days, back to the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to try and escape the Black Sea and a possible Ukrainian attack where it could be sunk. And then on top of that, there's no guarantee that once you escape the Black Sea, you're safe either, because the Mersin, which is the ship we're using in this hypothetical scenario, was apparently hit and sunk off the coast of Senegal, really showing that there is a chance that these ships could be attacked and sank anywhere in the world, wherever they're operating. So that means that, at least for Novorossiysk and Tuapse, it's going to be such a risky sort of an operation that, as far as a company is concerned for risk assessments, they would never want to send one of their ships and crew into the area, because one, they're going to lose the ship, and I'm not really sure if their insurance is going to cover ships that are lost due to wartime activities or the activities of a sovereign state's armed forces, meaning that the ship may be a total loss and they can't even get an insurance recovery off of it. And not only that, the crew is going to be put in jeopardy, and considering that the company may be sued for negligence within its home country or within the country of one of these citizens due to negligence or incompetence or gross, I guess you could say gross negligence that put them into a dangerous area where they could be killed, they could start losing their shirts in lawsuits in the future as well, in most of the countries where these crew members may be from. So for that reason,
imagine that real quick before we get off of that. You just mentioned the insurance thing right then. Imagine that. Imagine if it is covered. Like, for example, if these attacks are covered by insurance and these vessels are eligible for an insurance payout, which I'm not really sure how that works. I've heard before that with insurance, typically acts of war are not covered under most insurance plans, but then again, it could be different in the commercial shipping world. I'm not sure how that works, but if it was covered, I can only imagine this is going to send insurance for ships probably skyrocketing through the roof. This is probably going to have an effect on global shipping, actually, if you really think about it from that perspective. It could have an effect much larger than just the Black Sea.
Oh, definitely, most certainly, but most importantly for the Black Sea, and especially for companies that operate oil tankers. If a company is seen by an insurance company to have anything as far as involvement with the Russian Federation in transporting any oil from Russia, which, mind you all, is currently sanctioned, they are probably going to start jacking up the rates, because they know that any business cooperations with an oil tanker with the Russians is most likely going to end up quite badly in the future, and mostly end up to the loss of the vessel if they continue on with those actions. So any company that is working with the Russians right now are probably going to see their insurance rates get jacked up through the roof by major insurers like Lloyd's in Britain, which generally do this sort of insurance operations, so that way they don't lose their shirts when one of these ships sinks and these companies come to try and knock on the door and get an insurance payout for the loss of the vessel. Most likely not going to be given to them. And also, it generally isn't given to them anyways, because it does appear from some quick looking that there is absolutely no insurance coverage most of the time for acts of war at all. So if anyone attacks your ship and it's an armed attack against your vessel and its loss as a result, there very rarely, if ever, will be an insurance payout, as most policies for vessels do not include acts of war in the possible payouts or the return on the policy, basically. So in the larger part, this is going to make the Black Sea impassable for most ships. That means that the Russians are going to have to lean on one single port, which is probably the Ukrainian plan at this point, because the only port that's left within Western Russia, that is, which is where a lot of the oil is loaded on, there's only one major oil loading port here within the eastern part of Russia, and that's generally near Novorossiysk, Vladivostok and that surrounding area. The only port they would have left in Western Russia is the port of Ust-Luga. That is it. Ust-Luga is their largest port, mind you all, in Western Russia, and does have a significant oil loading capacity, but if this port also got hit, especially its pipe and pumping stations down here near to the very port itself, they could also see that Ust-Luga completely goes out as well. And if Ust-Luga goes out, that means that, one, ships can't load with oil where it's safe to load oil, and two, if the oil loading ports ever become operational for a limited period of time at Novorossiysk and Tuapse, ships are still going to have to make the incredibly dangerous journey to those ports to try and load up with oil and then leave and pray to God that they don't lose all of their profit margins for the past 10 years because the vessel's going to get hit and sunk by the Ukrainians. So with that in mind, it's not looking like that good of a picture for the Russian Federation at all at this point because of the ongoing attacks against their tankers, or generally the Shadow Fleet's tankers more so. Still, a lot of people are talking about Erdogan's statements that came out of Turkey today, because Erdogan was absolutely incensed. I wish we could show the clip, but sadly it appears that there's a copyright on the clip, so we were having to paraphrase it and just read out generally the gist of what Erdogan said within his address today. But Erdogan has stated that the Black Sea shipping is clearly threatened, and the wars have practically reached the very shores of Turkey itself within the area. This has led Erdogan to say that the Black Sea is no longer safe for anyone, and that there's an incredibly large risk that the vessels could be hit and destroyed transiting through the area. A lot of people have been putting out their thoughts, and also some prayers for the Turks, considering, interestingly enough, just to remind you all here, that one of the ships that actually has sunk, which is the Mersin, off of the coast of Senegal, was actually owned and operated by a Turkish company. So at the moment, Turkey has actually lost, as far as they're concerned, a ship of their country, the Mersin, off the coast of Senegal. So at the moment, there is a financial loss that Turkey has suffered as a result of this, but I do want to put it out there that, considering that the company that operates the Mersin did state that as of now they're going to be stopping any economic cooperation with the Russians, and the fact that it was an oil tanker that was hit and sank, and they were using an oil tanker as a part of their business cooperations with Russia, and all oil exports from Russia generally are considered to be sanctioned at the moment, it kind of leads you to know why that would have happened. Not putting it out there and saying that that's exactly the case, but I'm saying that it's a pretty strong case at this point that they were having business dealings with Russians they probably shouldn't have, but nevertheless, Turkey has still had a financial loss as a result of that action. And a lot of people are wondering what the Turks, or generally Erdogan, who is the leader of the Turks at this moment, will be doing in the future to address the situation that is now permeating through the Black Sea. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So since Erdogan did come out and give a statement right now, he said that clearly the Black Sea shipping is threatened by these attacks, and he warns of escalation by the Russians, and I'm not sure if he alluded to Turkey. I mean, maybe Turkey was alluding to themselves there, but they're saying that clearly shipping is being threatened there in the Black Sea. So what are your thoughts? 62% said Turkey will merely keep protesting and it will remain like that, while 18% said Turkey will end up threatening Ukraine over this, and 14% said Turkey will go silent on the issue. So clearly, this is going to impact Turkey. I think it's very clear at this point. Allegedly, the Kairos and Virat, those two vessels, the first two that were struck by Ukraine, those were struck just a few kilometers off the coast of Turkey. So that was extremely close to the Turkish coast. And that's going to have a bit of a chilling effect, if you ask me, on the ships that are going near those ports in Turkey and through the Black Sea. It's going to make a lot of people think twice about it, and it could end up impacting Turkey economically. So obviously, Erdogan has a reason to be upset about that. But at the same time, I don't think Turkey's going to end up threatening Ukraine over this, because Turkey is NATO, and even though they do like to do Turkey things, which is flip-flop a little bit and get confused about who they're supposed to support, I don't think they're going to threaten Ukraine directly over the ships getting hit, because the one thing that we're hearing, the allegation, is that these vessels are going to pick up Russian oil, allegedly, or they're going to drop it off. So what is Erdogan going to do? Tell Ukraine they can't strike something that's an economic target of the Russians because he doesn't want his economy to be hurt? That would be a little bit odd, considering the fact that these vessels are allegedly facilitating the sale of Russian oil in some way or another. So I would say I'm with the 61%. It'll merely be a protest from this point forward and nothing more than that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'd be with 61% as well. I think that the Turks are merely going to protest this, and that's about it. I think it actually may be left at just the comment made by Erdogan today, because Turkey is in an incredibly interesting situation as far as they operate foreign policy, to where their hands are kind of tied on this, and they really can't do a lot in either direction without it ending up not really being that beneficial for them. For one, I do want to point out that Turkey's relationship with Europe is an incredibly interesting one. Turkey is trying to expand their economic cooperation with countries that are around the area of the Danube River. Generally, those countries are Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Austria, along with a couple of others as well, especially really any country, even if it's not along the Danube River, that's in the Balkans. Turkey is basically in the modern era trying to reform the Ottoman Empire without it being the Ottoman Empire, only maintaining the economic benefits without Turkey having to actually administer the region. So recently, what Turkey has been doing as a nation is that they've been investing heavily inside the Balkans and the Danube River areas to try and build up and flesh out a significant economy that, one, Turkey has invested in and they're reaping the profits off of, and two, they have to pass out of the Danube and then through the Black Sea and the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles to get out to the Greater Sea, meaning that Turkey is basically creating their own economic mini-sphere within the Balkans area. They're also doing a very similar thing within the Middle East, and that's why you'll see that Turkey's actions don't really line up on par with what we do here in America or in the rest of the Western world. Because while we'll be incredibly hostile to the Iranians, and we'll be incredibly hostile to all of the Iranian terrorist forces in the region, and generally any government that doesn't appear to be that aligned with our interests, Turkey generally gives them a pretty wide breadth. Not because they like them, it's because they're wanting to open up business dealings with them and pretty much create the same thing in the Middle East that they're working on in the Balkans right now. That's what the Turks are wanting to do, and Ukraine is actually a pretty big part of that as well, because while Turkey's initiative on the Danube is the one that's focused on the most, Turkey also has an equally large ambition with the Dnipro River, which goes through Ukraine. Both of those rivers feed directly into the Black Sea and then out into the Mediterranean and the greater world, meaning that if Turkey builds up economic cooperation and development with all of these countries in the Middle East, the Balkans, and also Ukraine as well, they have a pretty significant economic minisphere that they're going to be profiting off of due to their trade and due to their economic relations. So for that reason, they can't really do a lot in response to this. If they did, if they started to chastise the Ukrainians for conducting these attacks or take action against them, they're going to start getting a decent amount, except for Hungary generally, of the Danube River countries incredibly angry. And they may start to curb their development or economic developments with the Turks into the future, which could end up being detrimental to their mini-sphere project. Not only that, the state of Ukraine will clearly be turned off of any further developments or any sort of cooperation with the Turks, which is also killing off pretty much what is considered by the Turks right now to be the possible golden egg, considering the amount of economic potential that exists in Ukraine due to the amount of minerals, resources, and manpower that's available within the country, even compared to others in the Balkans. Also, on top of that, if they do anything to try and insulate the shadow tanker, they're now starting to get involved in supporting possible sanctions dodging by the Russian Federation by using shadow tankers flagged out of different countries, which could end up bringing some heat on the Turks by generally the whole of the European Union. So they really can't go either way. They can't end up chastising the Ukrainians, they can't end up supporting the Russians, and also on top of that, they really can't screw over the Russians either. They generally have to leave these companies to get smacked and then back off eventually due to the damage they're facing from Ukrainian attacks, because they still have a decent amount of economic cooperation with Russia. Turkey currently is still Russia's third largest purchaser of crude oil. Number one is China, number two is India, and number three is Turkey. And they still are in that number three spot even right now. If they started to curb back that sort of economic cooperation, that could start to jack up crude oil prices within the Republic of Turkey, which would be somewhat unbeneficial. So generally, they can't do anything.
It's tough
either
to
way.
ride fences. It's tough to ride fences sometimes, and I think Turkey's going to find that out very, very soon. It seems like Ukraine's kind of forcing Turkey's hand here a little bit, because, like you said, they do have a very strong economic interest in Russia still, even to this day, and also they also want to play, I guess you could say, the devil's advocate for Turkey, and also support Ukraine as well to a certain degree. So between the two, it's kind of actually backfiring on Turkey a little bit now that these attacks on the ships have started, trying to ride that fence.
Yeah, it honestly is, really. So, I gotta say that, man, I gotta be honest with you, man, that fence riding is really giving them a bad rash, down there at this point. They might want to stop doing that and pick a side. And back in the day, folks, just to let y'all know, Turkey used to not be like this. To make the story short, back when Turkey as a country was founded in 1922, which a lot of y'all are like, 1922? Didn't the Ottoman Empire collapse in 1918? They did, but then there was a civil war that they fought from 1918 to 1922, and when they came out of it, this guy called Ataturk, which is basically Turkey's version of George Washington, founded what is now the Republic of Turkey, or as they call it now, Turkaya. I still call it the Republic of Turkey. Nevertheless, he modeled the country right after France. Everything about Turkey was just like France at the governmental level. They didn't have freedom of religion, they had freedom from religion. There could be absolutely no religious references or any governmental actions made off of a religious preference within the government. That's actually quite different than the United States. Somewhat similar, but still quite different in how it's actually playing out. Another thing that they also did is that they made the government very westernized. So when Turkey originally joined NATO back in the late 1940s, they were practically the France of that area of the Near East. And so there really wasn't that much of an issue with them being in NATO, even with the large amount of military coups that they had from about the 1960s onwards up until about the 1990s. After Erdogan took power in the country, things have started to change a lot recently within Turkey's foreign policy. One, they've started to lean heavily into more theocratic sorts of thinking and also policy making, generally leaning more into Islamism as a theology than the pretty much state-sponsored agnosticism that they used to have back in the day, and that's led to them to have a significant amount of foreign policy changes, including this attempt to build a mini-sphere that's generally putting them at odds with some Western policies, especially foreign policy within the Middle East, quite often. But that's generally the reason why that's going on, and why Turkey is kind of a bit of an outlier, honestly, at this point in NATO, and also even within something of the relations with the European Union, although they're not officially a member. Still, while all of this has been going on, and the Ukrainians are holding pretty firm on continuing these attacks against the Russian shadow tanker fleet, it appears that we've been able to see that Russia is holding firm in another way, in another front. Instead of them going up against oil tankers, they're going up against the United States of America's diplomatic negotiating teams, and specifically the Special Envoy. It's right, folks. It's time for us to get on into that next giant story, the one where Russia rejected the peace deal. Y'all already knew it was coming around. Everyone knew that that was going to be a result of this. Anyone who kidded themselves into thinking that a peace deal was going to come out of this at all was just hopeless, really. This was going to happen, and it happened today. Moving us into Moscow, let me bring y'all through this series of events. First, yesterday, Putin declared that they're now going to be expanding the amount of territory that Russia wants to control. In this clip here, which does not have subtitles from what we understand, Putin, dressed up in his little military LARPing outfit, stated that he had ordered the creation of a security zone. I remember that this happened a year ago, and he called it a sanitary zone, and it was supposed to be 15 miles deep along the entire Ukrainian border, and all they have to show for that is, let me see here. Oh yeah, this little area right here. That's it. That's all they have to show of the sanitary area. That, by the way, was supposed to be about 15 miles deep, so about that deep, along the entire Ukrainian border from Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv. Never happened. So now he's declaring the creation of a security zone along the Ukrainian border in the area of responsibility of Russia's North grouping. In effect, the signal's plans to expand control over border areas in Kharkiv, Sumy, and Chernihiv regions. So the Russians are basically going to be trying to now include, in a way, the Sumy, Chernihiv, and also Kharkiv oblasts into possible territories that Russia should control in the future. So now the goalpost has been moved effectively yesterday. Instead of Russia just controlling the entirety of Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk, Now they're basically going to be claiming the entirety of western Ukraine. Because if you look at the oblasts that are involved, they are quite large. The entirety of the Kharkiv Oblast is significant if the Russians were now to add that as a territorial claim because of this supposed security zone. On top of that, Sumy and Chernihiv is practically everything else within western Ukraine. If the Russians now claim that as possible territory, and for some reason the Russians ever tried to take that and succeeded in the future, all that Ukraine would be left with on the eastern side of the Dnieper River would be the eastern part of the city of Kiev, the city of Poltava, and the city of Dnipro. And that's it. That's all that Ukraine would have on the eastern side of the Dnipro. So generally it appears that Russia is already expanding their demands to include more territory. You know, folks, it reminds me of something. It reminds me of this time. They say it was a simpler time back then, but honestly it was about as complicated as today, where this guy with this funny mustache, who was a failed painter from Austria, who everyone claims is German these days, but he was actually Austrian, was in charge of this country, and he demanded the Sudetenland of the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia as it was called at the time. And then Europe gave it to him, and then he just annexed the rest of the Czech Republic. And then he went on to demand Danzig in Poland, and then World War II started. If I remember correctly, that's basically what the Russians are doing right now. They said, we only want the Sudetenland in the U.S. negotiations as far as the demands existed up until then. And now they're going, actually, as a matter of fact, we need to be even safer from the Ukrainians. Now we need to possibly include Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv in future negotiations to be handed over as well. That's basically now the Ukrainian version of the rest of the Czech Republic in the larger sense. Now, going on the heels of that, Witkoff arrived, looking like the Wojak, and went to go meet Putin and talk to him about the possible peace deal. This was the picture that we actually had from everyone waiting for the meeting to occur.
Look at that. Look at that who's in the mix right there, though. Notice this. You see there's the special envoy from the U.S. to Russia. There's also the president's son-in-law, but also there's the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs individual there in the mix, too. That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, Wang. Now that's interesting. That's something that nobody really pointed out a lot today. But I do have to say that Derek Tinnis did point this out quite well in the picture. The Chinese were actually involved in this discussion today. I want to remind you all of that here, considering that no one else has really been talking about that a lot in the news today. The Chinese were involved in these talks to some capacity. We're not really sure what role they posed in the talks, but they were present, and the actual Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, which is basically their version of the Secretary of State, or Russia's version of the Foreign Minister, was present within the meeting. Not only that, we also saw Horseface, Sergei Lavrov, right there. Look at him. That's the first time we've ever seen him.
Yeah, that's the first time we've seen him in a long time, actually. They've been keeping him hidden away in the closet for a very long time, or in the stables in his case. But that's crazy, though. They brought him out just to... I didn't really see him taking part in negotiations, like in the actual photos where they actually sat down. I don't recall seeing him. I saw the guy, the special investment fellow. What's his name? The guy who blocked us. I can't remember his name. He's someone important.
Let's see. Oh, man. It's like
Kirill Dmitriev.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kirill was there. Also, Ushakov was there, who's their main negotiator. But Lavrov just hanging out in the shadows back there. That's really interesting.
It is quite interesting. It is very interesting. They whipped out Lavrov like a mascot. They were like, here's Barnum and Bailey's freaks. Let's whip out Lavrov. And then they brought him in the room. Everyone took pictures of him, and they're like, man, he's half man, half horse. And then, they gave him a sugar cube, and then he wandered off before the actual negotiations began. Then the talks apparently started to begin, and we got this really interesting clip from the Russian government here of the beginning of the talks. I want y'all to notice who's here. Witkoff, this lady, and then Jared Kushner. No reason in particular he's there, he's just there. And then we have Ushakov, Putin, unfortunately unnamed man. I believe that may be a translator. Yeah, an aide or a translator. This also may be a translator. And then Kirill Dmitriev. It looks like he's still doing well ever since that near bear attack that he suffered in Alaska, very unfortunately, several months ago. But as the talks were about to begin, I just want y'all to notice how the atmosphere was set at the start of this all.
So pleased to see you.
Look at him smiling. He's just so happy to be here.
He's jolly over this. Like he didn't have that look on his face when he was meeting with the Ukrainian negotiators. The few pictures we saw, he looked like hell, to be perfectly honest, when he was talking to the Ukrainians. But he looks very very alert here, very giddy to see everybody. It's like he's honored almost.
He's so excited.
You've had a walk around the city. Beautiful walk.
It's a beautiful city, he says. It's the capital of the enemy state of the Republic. It's a beautiful city. Just love it so much. I really hope that they showed him the northern part of Moscow where the slums are at. I hope they didn't just wander him around the Kremlin, in the inner ring road here. Because, once you get outside of that, hell, even kind of inside the inner ring road, it's a hellhole in some areas. But, once you get outside of that very inner ring road around the Kremlin, oh, it becomes a real hell. So hopefully he saw that part. Anyways, you see Putin, he's like, this is Ushakov. That's the guy you were talking to on the phone and giving us insider information. And Ushakov's like, thank you so much, by the way. That was a real help. It's really going to help us to seal a deal here today.
Together with the Moscow authorities.
Ushakov's over there laughing. He's like, oh boy, we're about to do it to him. Oh man.
The Moscow authorities take pride, rightly.
I just gotta say this, like that Dmitriev guy right here, like that dude's got no chin line, like none.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. So they need to call the Russian police and put out a theft report for his chin. It's missing. I don't know where it's gone, but it's
Man, it's like almost like a straight line. Like if you look at like from the collar down there at the collar of his shirt, like up to the top of his chin, it's like a solid straight line. Like there's no like ledge or anything like you're supposed to have for like where your chin's at. It's just like straight up to the chin. Like what do they call it? It's a linear situation going on here.
You see, Matthew, the genius of it is that that's actually an FSB invention. They call it the neck guard. So if anyone ever tries to, take a pot shot at him, that's actually a whole bunch of body armor they have disguised as a fake neck, and it'll just deflect the bullets anywhere and everywhere but where they're going. Really, it truly.
Also, by the way, this guy right here might be a good candidate for Bosley too. That hairline is like literally, it's like from the side of the scalp down to the neck. Like he's got like, there's nothing left up top. Like he's just almost gone.
Man, I gotta be honest with you, man. While Lavrov is half man, half horse, Dmitriev is half man, half turtle. But anyways.
You've been able to see for yourselves. Yes, it's a magnificent city.
Oh, a magnificent city. I mean, oh wow, man, the glazing here couldn't be any better. But anyways, moving on from that, after the glazing was going on, he was very giddy to be in Moscow and to see, the bastard in the flesh. We then were able to hear that the United States apparently presented some additional documents beyond the 28-point plan to the Russian delegation in the talks, by the way, that lasted 5 hours. The Ukrainian talks didn't last that long at all. And the Russian talks apparently lasted in excess of 5 hours. But according to Kremlin aide Ushakov, who was at the very far right the far left of the Russian side of the table, stated that Moscow received 4 additional documents beside the original 28-point plan proposed by the president for resolving the situation in Ukraine. We do not know what was on those 4 additional documents, but the fact that the Russians mentioned them goes to suggest that there was something a little bit interesting on there. Additionally, we then were able to hear the conclusion. Ushakov came out after the 5-hour talks ended and instantly said, there is no compromise plan for Ukraine yet. Some American proposals are acceptable to Russia, while others are not. So they completely rejected the peace plan.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? They went through all that effort, all that trouble, the phone calls back and forth, showing up and listening probably to Putin ramble like an idiot for the 100th time, just for them to say, no thanks.
Have you ever heard of Rinky Dink the Wise? Yes, I have. Marvelous leader. Yes. Now, let me tell you about Rinky Dink the Wise. You see, he founded the Duchy of Muscovy a long time ago, starting the traditions of our proud people. Completely forget that the culture was entirely different back then, and the Mongols hadn't invaded our shithole and turned us into who we are today. This is all, most importantly, about Rinky Dink. We all love Rinky Dink the Wise. But nevertheless, speaking of rinky-dink, a lot of people have been wondering, why the hell did the Russian-U.S. peace talks last in excess of 3 hours, And from what we understand, they actually lasted longer than 5 hours. And Matthew, what were people thinking about that? What was the holdup in there? What lasted 5 hours? And what are you thinking lasted 5 hours?
All right. So some people are saying that 5 hours is a long time for these peace talks to be lasting, and some people are saying it's barely any time at all to actually negotiate a real peace. And obviously, the talks lasted this time 3+ hours, and then Russia came out right afterward and said, "Screw the United States. We're not taking any deal. It's all over with." So why did it take so long for Russia to come out and just simply say no? And it looks like 50% said Putin retold the story of Rinky Dink, while 35% said the U.S. was trying to convince Putin the entire time, and 6% said a deal was actually being worked out. And I'm not joking. I think seriously that Putin actually might have retold the story of Rinky Dink. That seems to be something that Putin does during these meetings. He comes in and starts retelling Russian and Soviet history from like the beginning of the cover to the back of the cover. I'm not really sure if that's like a torture strategy that Putin's using on the negotiators, or if maybe that's something that he really wants to tell people about and he really feels compelled to speak the whole history of the USSR. But I'm not even joking. I seriously think that's what Putin might have come in there and did, because he does that during interviews. He does that during the peace talks, and he did it with the U.S. president too when he was in Alaska. So I think Putin's really that deluded that he thinks that people really want to hear about the history of Rinky Dink the Wise and the Russian losses over history. I think he really thinks that. So the U.S. was probably trying to convince him, but they probably couldn't get a word in around the Rinky Dink story. But Enforcer, what say you?
You see, Matthew, if you've been looking, is a great and ignominious leader like myself does. The great deal of maps that were created by our wonderful leaders in princes and in kings many centuries ago. And as you can see, the priest, the ill-formed, was able to get this map here of what existed at the time. They used to call it apparently Middle Earth, and according to us, the Russians, well, we claim all of it. But it's a story for another time, as our great priest, the ill-formed, did let us know that this map is binding to all of our futures of the Russian territorial gains within this region. Excuse me, can we talk about the peace line? Listen, are you a negotiator? Or are you some kind of comedian? Now, as I was saying,
do you think that's why Witkoff was so jolly to show back up? Is Witkoff could be it could be that Witkoff's simply a man of history. It could be that maybe he's an expert in history and he's not just well experienced in real estate. Of course, he might actually really like history, and he's actually learning this really warped version of Russian history through these meetings that he's having with Putin. And every time he shows up, he's just all giddy. He's like a school child showing up. He's like, oh, Putin's going to tell me about these history stories again. But it turns out, though, Putin's history stories are about as reliable as the crackhead on the street telling you about something. It means nothing if you really think about it. So maybe that's it.
Man, honestly, man, Witkoff is like probably one of the most abstract history students ever. He just goes to every enemy of the country and listens to what they tell him about history, and then he goes, really, is that right? Like, he goes out to Iran, man, and Iran was like, you see, it's actually Israel that's in the wrong here. And he's like, is that so? Really? So the terrorist groups, they actually have a point? Like, it's like, yes, of course they do. And then he goes to Russia, and Putin's like, welcome back, my pupil. Are you ready to learn your next lesson about fake shit that I made up within the past 2 minutes? And he's like, yes, please. Actually, it was Russia that founded America through the great Georgy Washingtonsky. He was the one who founded the United States. Really? Yes, that's why we are supposed to have Alaska.
And then he comes back, and then Witkoff comes back and says in the report, okay, what happened, Witkoff? And he says, you wouldn't believe it. Putin told me this time. He told me that they actually single-handedly won World War II. Like, that's something that they don't even put in the history books. And then the main guy's like, can you believe it that they actually won World War II single-handedly? I was told that by the best people. Oh, my God. I would laugh harder if it wasn't, maybe true. I don't even know.
But I would have to say, folks, the reason why it took 5 hours is because he probably retold the story of Rinky Dink the Wise. Nothing new there. He's done that to everyone. And, I mean, there's no reason to doubt that he wouldn't have done that again. Because he did it, remember, first to Tucker Carlson, who apparently got to the truth about, what Russia is really about, and then he completely dropped that because he got punked by Putin. And then the president got punked by Putin in Anchorage because he also gave him the story of Rinky Dink, apparently to the point that the president yelled at him, "And F you, dumbass!" And then he ran out of the room, and then canceled the lunch and everything and sent him back to Russia because he just wouldn't sit there and stop going, "Listen, are you a president or a comedian? Now let me tell you," and then he kept going. So now they did that to Witkoff, and they once again rejected the peace proposal for, I think it's literally the 5th or 6th time at this point that a peace proposal has been flat out rejected by the Russians after they pretended like they would listen to it.
Yeah. There's a theory out there. There's a theory, and once again, you can make up your own mind about this because I don't think there's this much thought or strategy going into it. But some people are saying that maybe this was Rubio and the U.S. administration's strategy the whole time was to go through this really drawn out gamut of pretending to have peace talks again, so that way Putin could be the one to sabotage it. So that way they have a legitimate excuse to say, "Look, we tried our best to end this war in Ukraine. It's not our fault, the U.S. administration." Fault for it not ending, and we tried our hardest. It's really Putin is the one that forced us basically not to be able to end it. So that way they can place the blame on the Russians. I just don't think there's that much strategy going into it. Personally, I think they really were trying to go for a real peace. They were going to try to give up Ukraine, but Putin won't even agree to that. Putin won't agree to even take what he wants out of Ukraine. It won't work. So I think they're at a dead end, pretty much.
I think they are at a dead end. I don't really think there's much farther to go with this, but I'll also tell you all in my personal expertise of this situation, there is absolutely no way in hell that this was a plan by anyone in the government. I mean, they're just doing what they're told, and obviously they're running into a brick wall again. And I'm not even gonna be that optimistic because every other time that this has happened, which is at least 5 or 6 times this year, we have been optimistic and said, finally, they are going to learn here in the current administration in the United States that you can't talk to the Russians because they're not willing to talk about anything. And now they're going to start changing their approach. And then they would start this up again. So I'm going to be completely honest with you all. Based off of what the U.S. administration has done over the past year, what's going to happen is that we're going to get pissed off. We're going to say maybe 1 or 2 things that make it sound like we're pissed off with the Russians. Then Putin is going to go, "Stop that. Let us talk like reasonable men." And then they're going to go, "That's absolutely right. Send Witkoff again." And then they're going to go through this whole process again and probably get the Ukrainians, string the Ukrainians along and bend their arm to try and make them agree to even more insane demands. Then they'll go present that to the Russians. And then they'll reject that. And then we're back to square one again like we are today. Like, our speeches here on the channel about hopefully the administration learns this, that, and another about how to approach the Russians and how to deal with them. It seems as though it's falling on deaf ears, so I'm not even going to give that speech again because we're probably going to see the 7th round of failed peace talks happen probably within the next couple of weeks. I would be honest with y'all, I wouldn't be that shocked to think that they're probably going to go at this again, and then the president's going to say that there's going to be peace by Christmas, which has been said 9,000 times by 9,000 different people within the last 150 years about practically every single war that's ever happened. But anyways,
well, they've actually said now, or at least from what I've heard, they're saying that there is no deadline for the peace talks anymore, and that's what we're currently hearing. So before it was Christmas, now it's, well, I really don't have a deadline anymore. It's just whatever. Whenever it happens is when it happens. So it's almost identical to what we saw earlier this year, like during the first part of the year when they tried these peace talks as well. It's almost the same thing. They went through literally almost the exact same cycle. It's like a 6 cycle, like you hear about people with their ex or something like that. It's like they go back to their ex and they're like, oh, they can make it work this time, and then it blows up the same way again. Then they end up having a bad fallout, and then they like circle back around again. It's like a 6 circle like that. It's really wild. I've never really heard of anything quite like this in foreign policy before. This goes beyond even what what's his name, Chamberlain, was trying to do. This goes beyond that at this point. Even Chamberlain, like when he failed and Hitler went berserk after this failure that he had, it just went away and that was the end of it. This one's like a 6 cycle over and over and over.
Oh, and actually, Chamberlain resigned. Like, he resigned his position as the prime minister. I think it was 28 days into World War II beginning in August of 1939, and that's when Churchill became the leader of the Tory party, which actually at the time Chamberlain was a part of, and then that's when Churchill took over the reins through most of World War II until he was ousted in early 45 by the Labor Party and Clement Attlee. But generally, that's what we're seeing at the moment is generally going on is far more of an attempted appeasement than Chamberlain even conducted, which is honestly getting to the point that this is absolute insanity. Ushakov also further stated that we are no closer to resolving the crisis in Ukraine, and there is much work to be done. Once again, making it very clear the Russians are not going to be ending the war anytime soon and have no wish to. Now we are also hearing that apparently instead of Witkoff and Kushner going to Ukraine like they said they were right after the talks with, well, not Ukraine, but to go meet Zelensky in Europe at the moment, I believe in Brussels, now they're apparently just going to go straight back to Washington now that the Russians have practically spit in our face for the fifth or sixth time. Also, by the way, additional couple of topics, we have also been able to see a very interesting bit of insight from Geo Insider. And this picture here is actually incorrect. The person he's talking about is this guy right here. But Geo Insider put out something, and we actually follow Geo Insider, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and he follows us back. He has made an incredibly interesting piece of analysis, and I want to give him a big shout out here, because I actually did not hear of this foreign minister. I did know of this negotiating style because I've listened to a great deal of interviews with Richard Nixon after his presidency, where he talked about the foreign policy prerogatives of the United States globally, and also our position with the Soviets at the time, and then the future Russian Federation. The interviews were made just a few years before he died, so he actually was around to see the collapse of the Soviet Union and the rise of the Russian Federation. Nixon always said, just to tell you this, and also, by the way, regardless of your opinions of Nixon, pretty much everyone before Nixon and after Nixon did state that Nixon had the best understanding of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact out of anyone in America at the time, because as the vice president to Eisenhower, Nixon actually traveled for about an entire year nearly through the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, and was able to learn innately about their governmental structure internally, and also how they generally operate foreign policy, which made him a practical subject expert on the Russians, Eastern Europe, and also the entirety of the rest of the Soviet bloc. But according to Geo Insider, which this appears to be the very epicenter of the kind of speaking and talk that Nixon would make on how to approach the Russians, which was firmly in the not give ground, this is the statement by Geo Insider. To really understand how Russia thinks today at the negotiating table, we need to go a bit back in time. Enter Andrei Gromyko, which is this guy right here. And he, at the time, was the Soviet diplomat known as Mr. No, or in Russian, Mr. Niet. He wasn't just being stubborn, he had a method. He literally said about the West that it is impatient, divided, and always pushing for quick results, and that Moscow could use this to its advantage. His repeated vetoes at the UN weren't arbitrary, they were lessons in pressure, patience, and leverage. Every concession the West offered, he pushed for more, asking relentlessly, step by step, until the other side gave more than they expected. The idea was simple. The West wants action fast and results yesterday. The Russians don't. Delay, test, observe, and let your counterpart expose its divisions. Gromyko built a doctrine around exploiting Western weaknesses. If they push too hard, you stand firm. If they compromise too quickly, you extract more. He saw the West as fragmented and inconsistent, and he treated negotiations as a zero-sum game where time itself is the weapon. Look at Europe or the US today, divided on everything, as democratic systems are, arguing internally and chasing short-term optics, which has always been the case within democratic societies. Moscow sees the same patterns, and the strategy has not changed at all. When Russia negotiates, it's not about compromise first, it's about waiting, observing, and letting the other side make mistakes. So to understand the Russian policies today, whether in Europe, the UN, or with the global powers, remember Gromyko's approach. Patience over haste, leverage over agreement, and exploiting divisions over rushing deals. The history is old, but the method is very much alive and well. And I'd have to say that Geo Insider hit this practically dead on the nail. This is what I've been saying for an incredibly long time here on the channel about how the Russians deal with the greater part of the West, is that they are always going to be asking for more. And if you're willing to give them more, they'll take that and then go an extra mile and even ask for more beyond that. I didn't know that this was actually the man, Andrei Gromyko, who came up with that sort of an approach, but this was heavily talked about by multiple presidents, but most importantly, the former president, Richard Nixon, who generally is considered to be one of the most well-versed people in American foreign policy on how the Russians or the Soviets operated. He was so well-versed, mind you all, that he was a foreign policy advisor, I'm not even kidding, to pretty much every single president that came after him, whether they were Republican or Democrat. Even Bill Clinton had Nixon as a foreign policy advisor in the early 90s before Nixon's death in 1995. So it's quite clear that at the time, everyone knew that Nixon was an indispensable asset and generally intimately understood the Russian and Soviet sorts of negotiating and foreign policy positions. And if
Yeah.
Nixon says you're supposed to hold back and not give any ground on the Russians and be as pig-headed and stubborn as they are, then that generally is the most beneficial and successful approach to take.
Yeah, that's true. Also, by the way, this may have been, and once again, a very good piece of analysis by Geo Insider right there. That may have been, and it still is, the Russian strategy. It's patience over haste, and also to sit back and observe. But the problem is, though, time is something that Russia does not have on their side at this point. And also, if you recall, that was a strategy used during the USSR right there. Remember what happened to the USSR? It eventually collapsed after that strategy. So it worked in the short term, but in the long term, it pretty much cost Russia everything, and the USSR collapsed. So the same thing is kind of going to happen today, because once again, they have an impending economic crisis on their hands here. And the more they wait and the more they string this out, the bigger the risk gets of their entire economy collapsing with or without Chinese assistance. So that's a risk. They're using the same strategy. I would agree with Geo Insider, but I don't think this is going to produce positive results for them in the long run. It's probably going to end up leading to Russia's destruction, perhaps a USSR collapse times two.
And I would agree. And also on top of that, folks, notice this. Notice how we've gone over this on the channel over and over. What is important is that we do not give in to the Russians. We've said that endless times here on the channel. That should be the approach we take. The Russians want to treat time as a weapon to us because we're trying to look to get something fast, get a deal or end something. We shouldn't be doing that. We should have a consistent approach every single year through every administration that the Russians will be bled dry. They will eventually see that time isn't a weapon against us because of our haste. Time is a weapon against them because they're decaying from within. They know that as well as we do. And they also know that while they are decaying from the inside and time is generally against them more so than us, time is against us because we're only imagining that it is. What is stopping the war in Ukraine from going on for another possible year and a half before the Russians economically collapse? Absolutely nothing, rather than the willpower of some people in office in the United States that they just don't want to see it going on anymore. Let me ask this for the American audience. Which one of your sons or daughters, or which one of your family members or friends, have died in the war in Ukraine so far? Not a single one. So this war, as far as manpower and people that you know, is costing us nothing. For the Ukrainians, every single day they're losing a man, at least, or losing at least about 130 a day, wounded and killed at a minimum. On the flip side, though, they are also losing land, and they're also losing a great deal of innocent civilians as this war keeps going on, and they would lose a far great more if they ended up losing the war entirely. So for the Ukrainians, there is a very important reason and prerogative for them to keep fighting this war. It's the very existence of their own state and the very safety and security of their own people and families. So for that reason, we have no reason to want the war to end. The Ukrainians don't either. And the Russians are about to end up collapsing inwards on themselves if we just sat back and let them. So why not do that instead of what we're doing right now? That would make the most sense as a foreign policy approach, and it end up being the most beneficial thing. Just give Ukraine the arms and weaponry it needs to hold the Russians back, and maybe even try and push them back a little bit, or inflict even larger losses and casualties, and let the Russians collapse from within like they already are. That generally is the best approach we could have ever taken. But with that in mind, folks, before we move on into the rest of our news for the night, which we still have a lot, and of course, folks, you all know that the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow is about to be the next news segment, we are going to take a quick little breather for a minute to be able to address a couple of questions from the chat. We're going to address 3 of them, and then we're going to be moving on into the next segment of the news. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night. The first one is going to go to none other than Marion Deemert, a longtime channel legend, by the way, who's been here for ages on the channel. Truly a pillar of the community, as they say. But Marion put in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Marion, for that $50 support. We do appreciate that very, very much. And Marion said hello, and LSA.
And hello to you, Marion Deemert, and long live the Lee Spring Army. It's great to have you here tonight. And I got to thank you massively for supporting the channel and helping it to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And, of course, folks, it is the holiday season. It's the holiday season, the holiday season. You know that song. But hopefully, do you? Do you know that song?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard of
Yeah,
it. Man, you get
yeah.
insecure about your Christmas songs, I tell you.
Man, I like, man, honestly, man, I'm kind of getting a little insecure about it. I was like, maybe I didn't sing it good enough. But beyond that, I gotta say, folks like you help us to keep this thing running in the holiday season. The holiday seasons on this channel are a time of goodness, a time of fullness, where everybody gets to know each other. But most importantly, it also is a time where we are really having to generally fight against the holiday season here on the channel, because a lot of people actually go and enjoy time with their families or get their families to gather around and watch the show because everyone's together. So we have to make sure to keep powering through the holiday season, because while the holiday season is a great time for everyone, it's actually a time that we actually kind of struggle through every year. So like, at least on as far as the channel side of things go. But I got to thank you massively for support, Marion Deemer, because folks like you help us to make it on through December, so that way we can get on to January and February. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible to keep it going well on into the future, not only through December, but through the multiple years to come, because we have absolutely no intention of going anywhere. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Andrew Barbaro. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that $50 support as well, and also being a longtime channel viewer and legend also. And Andrew said, I know a politician told me the truth once, or was it they told me they were telling the truth? Honestly, Andrew, like there's two modes for politicians. It's true. Number one, they blatantly lie and gaslight people. Number two, they blatantly lie and they just don't try to gaslight at all. They just lie and just walk off. There's no politicians that I know that simply are truth tellers. That's not something they're known for, is telling the truth 24/7. Because since when do you play politics and you tell the truth about everything? Like, for example, if you see someone and they are maybe having a strange smell coming off them or something like that, and you're trying to be a politician, are you going to go up to that person that smells weird and say, hey, I think you're stinky? Or are you going to be like, oh, hey, how are you? You smell great. They're obviously going to do number two. They're going to lie, of course, because that's what you got to do as a politician. You got to lie about stupid stuff and important stuff. So that's the way they are. That's honestly just the troublesome politicians. But Enforcer, what say you?
Listen, Martha, I think that we all need to have a moment of honesty. I think that we all gathered around and talked about this a little bit further, we might be able to find some common ground on this matter. The matter that everything is doing great. Nothing has ever been better. Everything was bad before our party was elected. High inflation, unemployment, and of course rising prices. But now that we're in charge, everything's better. Sure, there's unemployment, rising prices, and inflation, but now that we're in charge, everything's just honky-dory. So please, make sure to vote for us again, because next time, we're really going to fix all the problems. I mean, it was just this time we kind of got a little hamstrung and set back by the other party. I mean, they really screwed us over and gave us the cupboards bare. But next time, if you elect us again, I promise you, we'll really fix the situation. Honest to God, please, give me another vote. But beyond that, I gotta say a huge thanks to you for the support, Andrew Barbaro, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on this channel and speak the truth. And we speak a lot of truth here on this channel. It doesn't really go one way or the other. It kind of goes both ways. It's a two-way street, you know. And I got to thank you greatly for that, Andrew, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality to keep it running year after year. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, I saw someone in the chat, folks, someone say this, and I'm going to address a live chat as a part of Andrew Barbaros, because I don't understand this, and this is what people say, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Zakinator said, the problem is you guys aren't realizing we don't have the same leverage over the Russians that we did decades ago. The unipolar movement is over, and that's why we have to give ground. You see, that philosophy doesn't make any sense, because I've been hearing that for about 10 years, ever since about the mid-2010s. And people have always been talking about this multipolar world that is going to emerge and come into existence. And because of the inevitability, the manifest destiny of this polar world, multipolar world, we practically have to give ground to this these multiple different poles or spheres around the world. And that is something that doesn't make any sense to me, because if you listen to what you just said, Zakinator, you've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you give ground, you're literally creating the very monster that you're fearing. You're creating that separate sphere of influence. You're actually giving them ground. You're giving them an ability. You're giving them an economy. You're giving them a trade base. You're giving them a lot to be able to grow into a sphere. That is why that doesn't really make any sense. It literally in the philosophy of, oh, it's a manifest destiny of multiple different spheres. Let's just give ground to these spheres of influence and let them create themselves just because we're scared that they're going to happen anyways. That doesn't make any sense. If anything, if we're seeing the emergence of a multipolar world, we should be even far more aggressive in protecting what's ours. We shouldn't be giving anything. If the Russians want to create their own sphere, good luck on them. Everyone in Europe is in NATO right now, except for Ukraine and Moldova, and they're going to have to end up probably losing a lot of people, and probably their whole country held in high water, to try and even gain a little sliver of it. Same with the Chinese. We shouldn't be giving the ground to them at all. Any ground given to them is a benefit to them and a loss to us. That wouldn't make any sense, because at that point, we're saying, oh, yes, we don't have the leverage that we had back then. We still have a great deal now. So that's why we got to give up a lot more leverage just because it's not even a fight worth fighting. Why is that the case? You're saying that a country with the GDP of the state of Texas we have absolutely no leverage over that state or that nation? Is that what you're saying? I mean, that doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it. This country right now is fighting Ukraine, which generally before this war was not known for having an incredibly competent or powerful military, just to be entirely honest. Over the last 4 years, they have turned into one of the most competent armies in the world, and not only that, they have made the Russians pay dearly for any foot of ground gained inside of their own country. Now, that's something that you can rarely ever see. Now, how in the world will we not have a leverage over a country like Russia when Ukraine, with a couple of dollar bin drones, can end up getting leverage over the Russians and pretty much bleeding their economy dry? That's a hard sell. Like, that's a very hard sell. And I've seen that philosophy said by people. And I think, I got to be honest with you, I think the origin of those sorts of foreign policy mindsets has to come from the Russians and the Chinese themselves, and pretty much defeating you in your own mind. So basically, they defeat you in person. It's basically like a psychological operation, because the concept behind that and the logic behind it, it makes no sense at all when you really think that out and talk it out. Yeah, we have no leverage over them, so let's give up the leverage we have and give them even more, so that we were even in a more disadvantageous position in the future. It just makes no sense at all. But anyways,
What's kind of wild? What's kind of wild is the United States actually funded creating a multipolar world, because the reason why the new axis of evil has a foothold right now is mainly because of China, and we funded China by trading heavily with them. Like, we got so intertwined with China and trading mega billions with them, and way more than that even in the modern days, that we can't even untangle ourselves from China. And China funds everybody bad, pretty much. Like, they're funding the bad folks in the Middle East. They're backing North Korea. They're backing Iran. They're backing Russia. And it's all economically. China won the economic side of things by creating their own sphere of influence, by basically playing the West and playing especially the United States, by making us believe that they were dormant and also somewhat docile. And Russia did the same thing too. Putin did it during the 2000s heavily. He tried to convince all the prior presidents that Russia was a new changed man all of a sudden, but obviously they weren't. They were simply rebuilding themselves to get ready for what they were doing here in Ukraine and in the Baltics area. So it's crazy because, for example, China's GDP skyrocketed over those 2000, I would say the 20 years or so. It skyrocketed from 1993 from 444 billion for China's GDP all the way to 18 trillion in 2022. So we literally funded the growth of this new axis, literally funded it ourselves.
yeah, I mean, honestly, we kind of did. The Russians, at least, we didn't really fund them at all. I mean, they're a lost cause, really. But with the Chinese, we certainly did. And I got to say, folks, that it was, in hindsight's 2020, and neither Nixon, who originally started to unfreeze relations with the communist Chinese, nor Clinton, who really opened up the trade with the Chinese, would have known how detrimental and damaging that would have been in the future, because at the time, China looked like a fairly benevolent country. And when I say that, a lot of people wouldn't believe that now. But if you looked at China back then, when Nixon talked to Mao, and China was basically a nation of peasant farmers, and also when Clinton talked to them, which it was still a nation of peasant farmers, nobody would have ever imagined that China would have turned into the grave risk or rival that it is today, because of what we did. Nobody would have known. And it would be great to say, oh, damn it, Nixon and Clinton screwed us over. But if you went back into the early 90s and you went back into the 70s, when those two major events happened, you would have looked at the Chinese and went, they're harmless. I mean, they couldn't have done anything to anyone. And I mean, I got to be honest with you, looking at what both of them did back then, I couldn't have blamed him. I mean, if I was alive at that time and didn't know what we know today, looking at China, you would have thought that they were completely helpless. And on top of that,
Yeah.
when Nixon was talking to them, they were actually in a shooting war on the border in Manchuria with the Soviet Union and were about to go to war with them. So we were aligning with the Chinese back then because it was the enemy of our enemy is our friend sort of a situation, a lot like we did with the Soviet Union in World War II. So,
Yeah.
hindsight's 2020, but knowing what we know today, a lot of that was a mistake. But anyways.
Yeah, also as well, it's also kind of crazy as well. We made that mistake with China back during the 2000s, and even a little bit before that too. Made the big mistake with China, thinking, oh, if we start trading with China heavily, we'll give China a way to grow. They'll not turn against us, and they'll be our friends because they have an economic incentive to remain our friends, which obviously didn't work out. We did the same thing with Russia too. We started all these initiatives with Russia. The U.S. was going headfirst into it, thinking, oh, look, Russia's our friend now. Putin's he's a changed man. He's going to stay nice and civil. They got the democracy thing going on where they kind of pretend like they're having elections, but they really don't. And what's the U.S. doing right now? They're trying to show up and give Russia economic incentives to be our friend again at these negotiations they're having with Witkoff, et cetera. They're doing the exact same thing, the exact same mistake again. When is the U.S. going to learn that economics is not the only sole motivating factor for these countries? It's not only economics. They have their own ambitions. Like, these countries thrive on taking land, conquering it, and also being what they are, which is authoritarian states. They're not fairly minded like the democratic states. So it's a complete ideological mismatch there. It's not going to be simply, let's all make money together and we'll all coexist peacefully. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I would have to agree. It doesn't work like that at all. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Big shout out once again to Andrew Barbara for the incredible support and help of this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on to the last question of this segment, and we're going to be getting on to the news of the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And our last super chat here goes to Con45. And thank you very much, Con, as well, for that $50 support. Very generous of you. And Con said, guys, you just asked the question. The Russia-U.S. peace talks lasted 3 hours in Moscow, despite Russia rejecting all deals, so why so long? And guys, you didn't put the correct answer in the choices. American billionaires were carving up Ukraine for 3 hours. Very sad.
I would say it's a possibility, but I mean, carving up Ukraine without Ukraine or Europe involved is going to be really tough to do. The reality is that Putin really did ramble, probably, in my opinion, for hours about rinky-dink the wise, and then they finally went, so are you going to agree? No, and then they just walked off, and that was probably the whole meeting in a nutshell, because everyone always thinks that whenever Putin's coming around, he's this like grand chess master and that they're actually talking about business. And every single time we've seen him in action, either with Tucker Carlson in the interview or the president in Anchorage or in these talks, he's always just rambled. It seems like he rambles as a strategy, or he's just absolutely mad and he's rambling because he doesn't know that it looks insane. It's one or the other. I would doubt that they were saying they're carving up Ukraine for hours, because Putin probably spent all of those hours that they could have done that just rambling about rinky-dink. But a huge thanks to you so much for this.
Yeah. Also, by the way, everybody's saying, and once again, I understand where Khan's coming from with that, because the reason why people were saying that is because, and not trying to get political with this, but Kushner was there at the thing. So when that guy shows up, people think, oh, it's like something business related or something going on like that. I don't think that's the case. I'll be honest with you, folks. The American billionaires have every reason in the world to want the Ukraine war to keep going because, number one, the defense industry is thriving like crazy right now in the United States. They are making money out the kazoo right now, selling new weapons to the United States military after the U.S. sends all these weapons to Ukraine and also to Europe as well, now that they're selling them to Europe. So they have a big reason to keep it going for that. And also as well, and this is kind of grim, but I think this is the way they think about it. So sort of put yourself in the mind of a sort of person without morals here for a second. The more Ukraine gets destroyed, the more has to be rebuilt. So that's the bigger investment for the American investment firms to start putting more money into Ukraine and also rebuilding the thing and making money is more, the more destroyed Ukraine gets, the more money they're going to make. So I know it sounds kind of like crass and kind of nasty, but I think that's the way some of these people think. So for billionaires, I think they'd want the war to keep going, to be honest. I don't think they want it to stop.
Yeah, I would have to say so. I don't think that they wanted to stop at all. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are going to be moving on into the second segment of this stream. Well, actually, the rest of the news. Sorry, I'm actually getting my transitions messed up here. We're moving on into the rest of the news for the night here. We're about to be getting back into the questions once this news segment is over. But for now, we're going to get through the rest of the news, moving us on into our next segment, which is the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow. And we sure have a great deal of news to talk about with the hunt for Captain Craig Sparrow. There's been a decent amount of developments today. We're going to make sure to get into all of them. But before we get on into them, I have seen some people saying there's a lot of anti-American comments in the chat. I personally haven't been seeing them, but I've seen a couple of people bring that up, and I haven't seen them myself personally. And also on
They don't
top of
exist. They're just making it up.
yeah, I think some people are just saying that because there's a criticism about U.S. foreign policy, so now apparently it's an attack on the whole country, maybe, or at least that's how they're construing it. I don't really know. But moving on from that, we did get to hear that the U.S. today is apparently not hitting boats. Apparently there's a pause on strikes because according to the Secretary of Defense, we've had a pause on striking boats because we're struggling to find boats to strike right now. Which is very interesting because they haven't had a lack of boats to hit up until very recently when the Congressional Armed Forces Committee started to investigate a possibility of a war crime that happened on September 2nd of this year when a boat in the area was hit 4 times by 4 hellfires. Apparently a double tap was conducted just to kill the crew, and then another double tap on top of the original double tap was conducted that didn't actually sink the boat. So a little bit interesting with that. The Congress is looking into that in the moment. We don't know what they're going to do with that. They may actually open up a congressional inquiry into the matter to try and see if they can get a little bit more information to possibly suggest that some sort of charges should be pressed about the matter on someone within the military for the action. It looks like right now fingers are flying from everywhere. Some people are actually blaming, I believe it was oh, dang, there's a general, I believe it's General Bradley, who's had a finger pointed at him for the one who actually approved the strikes, while some others are saying that it's the Secretary of Defense who's having the fingers pointed at him because he's generally the one who gave the standing orders to that area of responsibility for them to conduct the quadruple double taps. And then we also understand that there's some fingers being pointed at the president and a whole bunch of other people. So right now, this is actually starting to evolve into a bit of a scandal at the moment about what was involved in striking the boat. But we also been able to get additional information that apparently, according to a U.S. official who spoke with PBS News, SEAL Team 6 carried out 4, not 2 strikes on the suspected narco-trafficking vessel within the Southern Caribbean on September 2nd, which is actually the very instance that we're talking about right now. 2 to kill the crew, the 11 crew members, and the last 2 to sink the vessel off of the coast. So at the moment, we understand that the vessel was hit a whopping 4 times, or 2 double taps worth of strikes to not only kill the entire crew, but to also sink the vessel. We've then heard that apparently the U.S. is now coming up with backup plans in case of Maduro flees Venezuela. We do not know what those backup plans would entail, but it does appear that they are working on them at the moment. Meanwhile, the U.S.
Backup plans to what? Chase after Maduro if he flees, or to take over Venezuela?
I honestly don't know. I mean, I have no clue. They didn't really elaborate on that a lot. It's just backup plans in general. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's kind of weird. It's the way it's worded. It sounds like they have backup plans to like chase after Maduro if he leaves. It's like surely they wouldn't want to chase after him. Is it at that point he's left Venezuela at that point? So problem solved. He fled and left, and he went somewhere else. So why would they? That doesn't make much sense to me. Maybe we'll have to find out later what they meant.
Yeah, I would have to say we'll have to find out later because at the moment it's so vague. There's absolutely no understanding by either of us what that really means. Moving on from that, though, we did see a major movement of aerial tankers near to the area of Southern California over San Diego, apparently involving a decent number of KC-46s and KC-135s. We don't know where they were going. They were flying into California, but they may be eventually conga lining all the way into Southcom. We're not really sure at the moment. Meanwhile, in southern Florida, we did see a whole bunch, I mean a load of P-8 Poseidons, 6 of them, heading to their way to U.S. Southcom's command. This is a huge number of P-8 Poseidons, by the way. The P-8 Poseidon is a modified 737 that is used by the U.S. Navy for a wide variety of purposes. Here's a P-8 Poseidon right here, just to give you all a picture of it. So currently there are an additional 6 of these, I believe, that are going to be joining the 2 or 3 of them that are currently within the Caribbean as a part of their operations, greatly expanding the Navy's recon, command, and also anti-submarine warfare abilities that they will have in the area, at least at the moment. We've also heard some statements out of the U.S. government about the situation. One, we have been able to hear that the president is going to be making an announcement tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday. We don't know what about. It might be about Venezuela, or it might be about Russia, or something. We don't really know. We also were able to hear that apparently strikes on Venezuela are going to be happening soon, as the president has stated that the U.S. will start striking ground targets as part of the fight against drug cartels in Latin America. We've been hearing this for 95 days, so I don't know if this is going to be happening anytime soon, or if that's just another statement. We've also...
At this point, it can't be a lack of deployments at this point, because I'm pretty sure we got the aircraft carriers down there, we got the destroyers down there, we've got all the SEAL teams are obviously down there, special forces are, so they couldn't be waiting for something else militarily to show up, because everything's literally there. Like, it's one of the largest military deployments in modern history. It's like 20% of the Navy's there, so at this point, it's purely political. It can't be anything military related at this point.
I would have to largely say that I would agree. We've also heard, by the way, just to add this in, that the president has stated, I cannot play the clip, but if you all would like to hear him actually say this word for word, you can click on the link in the description below, go to the markers in Washington, look for the ones in dark gray, and click on this one. You'll be able to hear it for yourself. But the president has stated that any country suspected of trafficking drugs to the United States is subject to attack, not just Venezuela. So this now moves the potential targets for the United States from just Venezuela. Let me show you this right here. Just Venezuela, which is this country right here, to practically the entirety of the northern part of South America and the whole of Central America. So that was now stated as of today, which is probably going to have some ramifications. Considering that Mexico is our largest trade partner with a collective trade of about $850 billion a year, with the United States as an individual country, this could start to impact that sort of a trade relation, which can also start to have a even far greater amount of economic damage than any sort of a trade war with China ever would have created. So we'll generally have to see how the Mexicans react to that sort of a statement, because it might not be that good, and if it's not good, then we're definitely going to be in some trouble there. So we'll have to see, but that's currently the statement right now, and a lot of people are also wondering, what's going on with this whole Venezuela thing? It's been 95 days now. That's a little bit over 3 months. That's 3 months and some odd change of time where we have seen that we have been saying that we're going to go to war with Venezuela, or we're going to invade them, or we're going to bomb them, and we haven't done either one of those three. And a lot of people are wondering what's the holdup and what's going on at this point. Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So we are hearing, once again, apparently directly from the very top of the U.S. official ladder, which is the president, that strikes are coming very soon on Venezuela. And we've heard that many, many times at this point. And it really hasn't happened yet. But pressure is mounting for something to happen on Venezuela since they deploy so many military forces. So what happens now? The poll is actually pretty much all over the place. 34% said the U.S. is likely negotiating with Maduro, and that's why strikes have not occurred, while 27% said strikes were never going to happen, and 21% said the U.S. is worried about China getting involved, and that's why they're waiting. So I would say, generally speaking, from what we've heard so far, I think the U.S. is negotiating with Maduro, and I have a hunch this is what's happened. The U.S. probably expected this to go much differently. I think they expected to deploy all these military assets, and that Maduro would be scared and shaking so badly that he would literally be begging for any type of deal. But I don't think it turned out that way. I think it's actually not working the way the U.S. hoped, and Maduro is playing a little bit more harder to get than they originally planned. So right now, they're basically trying to determine oh crap, we've put the military down there near Venezuela. Are we actually going to start a war with Venezuela? Or are we going to wait and see if Maduro actually chickens out? I think that's kind of where they're at right now. And also, you can't forget all the heat that is currently on the military and the U.S. leadership right now for these alleged double taps that are happening down there. There's a whole can of worms being opened with that right now, a whole scandal with it. And I think that's playing into the hesitancy to carry out these massive strikes. So I'm with the 35%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I have no idea what's going to be happening. I would have to say that out of the three options, I would most likely go with the 27% that said strikes were never going to happen, because there has not really been a lot of follow through by the current administration and really going in with any heavy military action. The best example we have of that is the only time they've ever gone in with military action. Actually, the two times they went in with military action against anyone, which was one, the Houthis, and two, Iran. Those are the only two people in the current administration that have ever been attacked, and it was a fairly limited sort of a campaign at that. The airstrikes that we conducted on the Houthis in the earlier part of this year was about the same size and intensity as the ones that were conducted under the prior administration for the very same reasons. They ended up with almost the same results, and it really changed nothing. So, and also before anyone comes in here because they read a tabloid from like Fox News or CNN or anything, and y'all try and tell me the truth, we know the truth. We watched all the damage assessments come out and all the video and picture evidence here on the show. The damage that was caused was that a couple of top officials were killed under this administration of the Houthis. A couple of top leaders of the Houthis were killed under the prior administration. A little bit of damage was done to their fighting abilities, but outside of that, they weren't put down and out, and they continued strikes against ships under both administrations. Still to this day, that's the case. So basically, a very lackadaisical approach, considering that last year, the current administration, while it was campaigning, was saying that the prior administration was taking an incredibly lax approach on the Houthis and didn't completely destroy them, but they were going to completely destroy them. Then they came in, bombed them a little bit, and walked off just like their last administration did, and they're still there. So basically a very weak approach. Then with the 12-day war, when we conducted Operation Midnight Hammer, instead of conducting a multi-week-long air campaign, like multiple U.S. officials were saying at the highest echelons of the Department of Defense, we went with a one-night, very indecisive sort of a strike that it really doesn't appear to have impacted Iran's nuclear research and development capabilities at all. And then when it came out, the results, that it was generally a failure and that we didn't cause enough damage to their nuclear research and development programs, instead of reversing our original action of the one-and-done strike and going with a multi-week-long campaign, we simply lied about the results, said that it went amazingly well, and that it was the best strike in history, and then we just completely ignored the fact that we really didn't do much to actually curb Iran's nuclear research and development capabilities. So generally we've seen that whenever the U.S. administration does conduct any military act, it's incredibly weak and doesn't really achieve a great deal. And that's if they ever conduct one anyways. Most of the time, in most situations, there is hardly any aggression shown, at least militarily, to anyone. Even China. Even with the trade wars that we were having earlier on in the year with China, or at least the threats of trade wars, no actual military movements were made. And at the moment, we're actually pretty much threatening the Japanese behind the scene to pull the air defense systems that they have near the Yonaguni Islands out because it might incense the Chinese and make them angry. So generally, our posturing as far as the armed forces are concerned has usually been quite lackluster whenever used and non-existent in most cases. So with this in mind, I would have to say that going off of that sort of an example and coming down here, this was supposed to just be a dog and pony show, basically. We move everyone down here and spend a whole bunch of money to ooh and ah the Venezuelan government into a whole bunch of fear, hopefully have them run off, and then we win. And now that that's not happening, now we're having to figure out, do we really want to bomb them or do we not? And now we're trying to sit here and figure that out, and that's once again, like everything else, going in a basically roundabout cycle to where we're going to bomb them, and then we hold, and then another 2 weeks later we're going to bomb them, and then we hold, and we've been doing that for 3 months now.
Yeah, it kind of goes into what we were saying before, like when this all really started kicking off and the military started sending tons of naval vessels to the area. We said it doesn't really seem like there's a really clear plan for what's happening here, and the current actions kind of prove that. It really does kind of prove it. The U.S. really didn't think this through very well, and it was obvious from the beginning to us and also to a lot of people in the chat as well, but some people were saying, oh, no, like trust the process, the U.S. has a plan here. I don't think they did. I think their plan was hope and pray that Maduro chickened out and got super scared disappeared really quick, and I don't think that happened. So now they're in this limbo state here where they're trying to determine, first of all, do they have the legal right to conduct this operation they're doing? That's number one. There's a huge question about that. And then number two, do we actually want to get a war started in Venezuela after we've already sunk billions of dollars into this massive deployment off the coast? It's really a quagmire is what it's turned into, and pretty much anybody could have seen this coming, to be perfectly honest.
I would have to be honest, it does appear that that is the case, and we're just going to generally, of course, folks, have to take this one day by day. I would love to be able to give you all a fairly accurate window of what's probably going to happen within the next several weeks, but we have absolutely no clue. We're about as in the blind on this as all of y'all are, so we're just going to follow the story day to day, and when strikes are conducted, we will be covering those strikes, hopefully as soon as we can. I also have to say this, however, due to the fact that this is such an indecisive approach and it's waffling every day, we can't be on high alert here at Enforcer HQ every single day for months on end while this dude tries to figure out what he actually wants to do after 3 months of doing nothing. So generally, if it happens and we're in the HQ to run a stream immediately as soon as it starts happening, we will be. But outside of that, if strikes start happening, we may be an hour or two away from even going live at that point to cover it, because we can't be on high alert indefinitely, because the president comes out every week saying that we're about to bomb them literally tomorrow, and then another month passes and then we still don't do anything. So with that, I hope that does address that news fairly well. And also, moving on from that, we haven't been able to get some news out of India that apparently Putin's going down there to peddle snake oils. Generally, what he's doing is he's going to be going to India to try and beg them to buy Russian oil, so that way the Russian economy isn't completely obliterated within the next couple of months, because they're losing their largest oil markets, which is China and India. Meanwhile, we've also heard, inside of Europe, a pretty wild statement, and this is one I gotta be honest with y'all, I have no clue what this was and why this was said, but the Russians did respond to it, and it was quite interesting. NATO has a plan B, that if current peace efforts fail, they're going to start moving on into increasing military aid, increasing support for the Ukrainian economy, and also expanding sanctions. But while that was being said, this other guy inside of NATO, who is General Giuseppe, or the NATO Military Committee Chair, Admiral Giuseppe Dragoni, who is from Italy, told the Financial Times that a preemptive strike by NATO on Russia could be seen as a defensive action, and that might be considered.
Man, Giuseppe wilding out. Giuseppe won all that smoke from Russia. I tell you what, this is totally left field with this, like completely left field. NATO can't bring themselves to shoot down drones violating their airspace. But apparently, if this report is accurate, apparently somebody wants to go start striking into Russia. It's kind of crazy.
Man, everyone inside of NATO is like, man, can we shoot down the drone? Meanwhile, Giuseppe, just to blast the bitches. Man, it's like, bro, it's like,
Mama May, I'm going to tend to this today.
Man, he said, if my mother had the wheels, she would have been a tank. Roll to Moscow. Man, it's like, yo, calm down. It's like, so right now, everyone, we're trying to get Belgium on board with just liquidating anything that they've seized from Russian assets. We're trying to get anyone to shoot down a Russian drone. And right now, a lot of NATO countries are too scared to do really anything that might be considered aggressive against the Russians, even if it is clearly a self-defense scenario. Meanwhile, Giuseppe's out here saying that we're going to start striking Moscow and St. Petersburg tomorrow as a possible option. So I don't know where the hell Giuseppe got that from. I'll just be honest with you, I don't really think that's backed by anything. I think he may have just said that as an aside to the Financial Times, because they might have asked him about that. Really kind of crazy statement, and I'll be entirely honest with you all, because on top of that, the NATO charter isn't even designed to conduct any offensive actions whatsoever, especially preemptive strikes. Preemptive strikes are offensive actions. You cannot claim that you took a defensive action by pre-invading someone or pre-attacking them. That is an offensive action in itself, and that is not supported in the NATO charter in any article or any provision. Or any statute beyond that. It just doesn't exist. So I don't know where in the world this guy got that from, because NATO isn't even designed to be able to take an action like this.
He was probably just musing around, but it's like, when you're involved with NATO, which is one of the most powerful military alliances on the planet, you got to be very cautious with how you word things. I think maybe he was just saying it as a hypothetical or something. He didn't really mean like he wants to launch preemptive strikes on Russia like tomorrow or something. But I mean, to even say that out loud, I will admit that's a little bit crazy to say that out loud. Like, even if NATO really thinks that, you want to really like keep that behind closed doors, because it's pretty out there to say they're going to start striking Russia. Talk about, escalating something. That's a hell of an escalation.
Man. Oh man, dude, everyone in NATO, man, they're like, yeah, I wonder if we shoot down the drones. And then Giuseppe's just over there at his corner of the table. I think we should just start the bombing. And everyone just looks at him and they go, who invited this guy? Like, who brought him here? But anyways, Giuseppe out there, he wildin'. I gotta say though, folks, big shout out to Giuseppe. Giuseppe is on that business. Like, regardless whether this is absolutely crazy statements and that NATO can actually do this, Giuseppe is out here and he's just speaking freely. I mean, he just doesn't really care. I mean, like, he's just like, we could just bomb them. Like, it's like, man, I mean, like, kind of a little honorable. The dude, even as a official NATO representative, considering that everyone is kind of shaking in their boots right now to really do anything to Russia, is willing to come out and make a statement like this. This is what we call in America an original gangster. And you're looking at one right here. That guy.
I'll tell you what, this guy's hardcore. It's so crazy that Russia even responded to his statement there. Russia said, "Yo, that's crazy." Like that's they said something literally along those lines. They were like, "This is insane and it's escalatory." Which I think we even have the post here. Yeah, there it is. I think yeah.
Oh
yeah,
wait.
Maybe that's not it right there.
Let's see here. Let me see here. Oh dang. Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry, that's another piece of news. This is the closest I actually had. I saw the other one, but I had to trim it. But this is the one that kind of summarizes it.
Yeah, well, Russia responded to it. They weren't happy, obviously, with that. But honestly, though, it gave Russia a taste of their own medicine. Russia's always talking about nuking NATO and nuking the West. So Russia got a taste of their own medicine for once. And Russia nearly crapped their pants today after they heard that Italian fellow say that. So they got a taste of it, and they didn't like it.
Man, dude, I think it was Ushakov that said, honestly, that's just like crazy and very escalatory, man. He's just like, I don't really know what to make of that. Man, Giuseppe's down there, man. He's saying, here in Italy, we are not known for a lot of things rather than a nicer food and a nicer cars. But if you want to catch a hands, you can catch a fade. And like, bro, it's like, go get him, Giuseppe, man, get him. But anyways, I gotta say, folks, right now we need to make Sikorski, who is the foreign minister of Poland, and Giuseppe mascots of NATO, because I think at this point they're going neck and neck right now for being real ones. Like, statements from Giuseppe, I will admit, absolutely insane. But I still respect that he's willing to just say something like that honestly is quite escalatory. Still, a lot of people are actually talking about this, and it seems like a lot of people are actually on board with what our boy Giuseppe was actually saying. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so a whopping 53% of the audience said that's a totally valid idea to preemptively strike Russia over these hybrid attacks against Europe, while 20% said that's a really stupid idea, and 18% said, NATO is extremely confused and they're not really sure what they want to do. So, like I said, I think the fellow was musing this idea, like discussing it as a question, I think. I don't think he was actually advocating to go strike Russia tomorrow. It was simply an idea of, possibly, starting World War III maybe. But that's what he was apparently saying to the press. But I would personally say it seems NATO is extremely confused because at the same time, like I mentioned, NATO can't even bring themselves to shoot down Russian drones that are unarmed, as far as we're aware. They can't even shoot those down over their own airspace. But yet at the same time, we'll hear NATO officials discussing preemptively striking Russia, which is actually against NATO doctrine. NATO's defensive, and a preemptive strike by nature is actually an offensive action. It's not defensive, it's offensive. So I think NATO is confused. They're not really sure where they stand on the issue. There's so many different people with different ideas in NATO, and also obviously the mass confusion from the United States, that they're really not sure what policy they're really taking here. So I'm with the 18%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it is a pretty interesting idea. I would have to generally go with the 18%, though. It is extremely confused. And I've seen a lot of people saying this, but this is how we kind of have to work it. A lot of people are saying Russia has practically attacked us already, and they have. But the thing is that you have to make what we're doing a direct response to that. Like, it can't just happen like 3 months later where we're like, oh, by the way, we're just going to bomb you now. And also on top of that, Giuseppe was saying that about the possibility of the war in Ukraine not ending and it possibly escalating. That's what he generally said that about. And NATO, as far as a defensive alliance, has absolutely no defensive stake in Ukraine because it's not a NATO state. Now, Europe and the United States, and generally NATO as a whole, have a vested interest in supporting Ukraine, but not an invested defensive initiative to where we can attack Russia on their behalf. That doesn't exist because they're not in NATO. Additionally, if we wanted to make this into a situation, you can't just sit there and go, I feel like bombing them today. You have to wait for them to do something again, because all these situations that have happened have come to pass, and the responses have been made, and we didn't make them that sort of a response. If we wanted to do that, we have to wait for the Russians to do something again, like fly a drone over or, blow up another Polish railway, and then we go, you know what? That's it. We might start bombing them. And then we start moving forces to the border, and we don't preemptively attack them, obviously, but we start to build up our escalatory steps to get to that point and give them a bit of a chance to get on the off-ramp so that way we don't have to end up possibly getting into a third world war. We still have a chance to back the whole thing off, but that's how you generally have to work it. We can't just sit there one day and be like, you know what? F them. Just start bombing them out of the blue. There has to be like a clear groundwork built up to respond to something that they've done. And it has to be something that directly affects NATO as well, not something that is more so a tertiary effect to NATO like the war in Ukraine is. But with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can. And moving on from that, we've also been able to hear, in more shocking development, that the U.S. has apparently cut all contacts with the German Ministry of Defense. This is the fella right here, by the way. That's the guy who was very excited about the Kursk battle, the battle for Kursk that happened in 2024. That's that guy who's actually in charge of the Ministry of Defense. But beyond that, they've completely cut off contact with them for unknown reasons. Moving on out of Germany, and that unfortunate news, we are going to be finally moving on to the war in Ukraine and getting through all of that. First off, we have been able to hear that the Russians have had a great victory today. According to REI Novosti, which this statement was originally in Russian and translated, on the evening of November 30th, Putin visited one of the command posts of the joint group of forces, where he received reports on the liberation of Krasnoarmeysk and Volchansk, according to Peskov.
Where's that at?
I looked on the map. I couldn't find either of these cities. They don't exist.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, Russia has gone into the shadow realm now. They're taking over the shadow cities next.
Man, God forbid they take Ditch Gemini, like here in America or something like that, man. Man, I'm going to be honest, man. You got to watch out for those people who go to like Philadelphia, and all those sorts of places like that. Very scary sort of a thing when they start taking cities like that are in the fifth dimension, because you never know what they're capable of beyond that. But apparently, they have declared victory in two towns that literally do not exist. There is no Volchansk and there is no Krasnoarmeysk anywhere in Russia or Ukraine. These are literally made-up city names. I'm seeing
some people say that the Krasno, whatever the first word was, is apparently what the Russians are using to describe Pokrovsk or Vovchansk, one or the other.
Well, I don't even think Vovchansk is named Volchansk in Russian. I think it is Vovchansk still. But also on top of that, they haven't taken either town either. So that also is a bit of an issue there as well, if that's what they're claiming. But moving on from that, we did also get to see, moving on through Russia, that a refinery was hit within Oriel, or as they called it, Ural, today. See the fire burning here. Ooh, smoking.
Oral's always getting smacked in the mouth.
Man, I guess you could say that the Russians, they like Oral, блин. That's the town, by the way.
I'll tell you what, the Russians might need mouth to mouth after that one.
Oh, man, but moving on further on down, we also got to see that the FSB headquarters was blown up in Achkuy-Martan in Chechnya. Achkuy-Martan is a smaller town over here in the western area of the area of the semi-autonomous Republic of Chechnya. And while it's semi-autonomous, apparently the Russian version of the CIA still exists. But they blew up the headquarters within the city, which, honestly, who could complain? We've also been able to hear additional details that the Ukrainians are conducting another massive drone attack. This one, right here. We're waiting for the details to come out on it, at least on the damage that's going to be caused. So we'll be keeping you all up to date on that, most likely tomorrow when all of those drones start to hit their marks. Moving on from that and on into Ukraine, we've also seen a Ukrainian air defense crew have a very close call, as while they were shooting at a Shahed, apparently the Shahed decided to aim for the air defense truck, leaving everyone to have to run for the hills away from the car before it was hit. So here's the clip. We hear them firing at the drone. We hear it coming on in, and they're yelling to bail. Everyone's hopping off the truck and running. And right here, it hits the truck.
Oh my god.
And they turn around and the thing is a smoldering mess.
Wow, they really waited a long time to run away from that thing, too. Like, they could hear it coming for miles, and they were just still standing near it.
Man, and they were still gunning for that thing, too, up until the literal last minute. Oddly enough, the Shahed, instead of just trying to fly over, the operator apparently aimed right for that air defense truck, and they wasted a Shahed. Instead of hitting Ukrainian civilians, they hit the Ukrainian air defense truck that had already been abandoned by the crew before it was hit. So rather than the loss of the vehicle, the Ukrainians didn't lose a single life because of that drone, which, when you put it that way, it's a lot better that that Russian drone went for the air defense truck rather than an apartment inside of Kyiv. Moving on from that, we did get some statements from President Zelensky today, including some statements that he made about the ongoing peace attempts by the U.S. There will be no simple solutions to ending this war. We understand what is happening. We understand who you're dealing with. The issue is not the difficulty of making decisions. I'm capable of making them. What matters is that everything is fair and transparent, that there are no games played behind Ukraine's back, that nothing is decided without Ukraine, about us, about our future. The most sensitive things and the most difficult questions are about territories and about frozen assets. I can't speak on behalf of European leaders about frozen money in Europe. I can only share my view, and they can support me, and about security guarantees. We count on strong security guarantees from the United States and Europe, and some other leaders. This is the coalition of the willing topics. We work on it. I think these three topics are the most sensitive and important, and our teams will continue to work on them. So that is the statement from Volodymyr Zelensky today about the ongoing peace attempts, and it does appear quite clear that Zelensky is trying to make it obvious through the statement that there are games being played behind Ukraine's back, at least according to him, which we generally already know of, and that they're still trying to deal with the issues that they have constitutionally, to where the Ukrainian government can't just cede territory because the Constitution doesn't allow it inside their country. But moving on from that, we also heard that Zelensky is apparently afraid that, according to him, if he was afraid that the U.S. might lose interest in the process, and he responded that he actually is afraid that the U.S. might just walk off in the midst of this thing and leave Ukraine high and dry, with only Europe and Ukraine left to continue on the struggle. So it does appear that Zelensky is losing some faith currently in the U.S. negotiating process and the U.S.'s current foreign policy administration currently. Moving on from that, though, and on into our location unknowns, we also got the Russian casualty report over the course of the day, which was quite nice.
One Bobcat skid steer. Look at that. I love to see it, but tell us more.
And Miss Decent, keeper of the record, stated that typo, actual tanks are 0. But 11,387 is the correct number. Troop losses continue to average in the 1,000 to 1,100 range, and most categories are below average, especially UAVs. But one Bobcat special equipment is great, and we were able to see that over the past 24 hours, 1,110 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed. We've also seen that one APC was lost, along with 58 supply trucks, 14 artillery pieces, 51 drones, and one Bobcat skid steer. All in all, a pretty decent day, everything considered, and it does appear that the Ukrainians are continuing to hold the line. Meanwhile, up in the Vovchansk area, we were able to see Ukrainian fiber optic drones targeting and hitting Russians in the forests just north and west of the city, which we can see in these clips right here. We see this drone just scouring through the forest, literally looking side to side, looking for Russians that might be in the area, and it looks like it just found a couple, and it looks like it got them. We can see this.
Wow, that was a good sight on that drone, too, because those guys were nearly invisible, the way they were hiding behind those trees.
Man, honestly. Oh, look, these guys are playing tag. And tag, you're it, and he's it.
Oh, my God.
We now see them going for another one. It looks like he tripped and fell. He's in the horror movie, Friday the 13th. And we can see him getting it. This is why, folks, it's just not a good idea to invade another country, especially one that you have no real good reason of invading, like Ukraine. It ends up like this. Oh, that guy tried to do the shimmy. It didn't work too well either. Drones are pretty much impossible at this point of the war to be able to evade. Once one sees you, you're practically dead at that point.
How are all these guys tripping? Like at the last second, it's like they're all tripping.
Yeah, they honestly all are. And they also got this, I don't know what he was doing. This guy's sleeping. And moving on from that, we can also see here, Usain Bolt apparently darting through the field didn't really work out that well for him. We can also see an armor plate right there, which suggests that a Russian is nearby. Don't know why he would abandon the plate. Oh, there he is, without the plate, and that was that. But anyways, moving on from that clip and on into the city, we also get to see the Ukrainians conducting airstrikes on the Russians within the northern part of Vovchansk as well, in this clip right here. The Ukrainians have been fighting a horrendously long battle for the city of Vovchansk. It's lasted for about 2 years at this point, and the Russians nor the Ukrainians appear to be in any clear position to retake the entirety of the city anytime soon. The Russians control the northern part, and the Ukrainians control the southern part, and it's remained that way for literally 2 years. Moving on from that and out of that area of the front line, we are going to be moving on down and into the area of Kupiansk, where good news has come out today that the Ukrainians have been able to clear out the entirety of the southern area of the city of Kupiansk and appear to be counterattacking the center of the city. Once again, showing that the Russians are going to be having an incredibly difficult time, at least in the Kupiansk front, and the Ukrainians are still firmly in control of Kupiansk-Vloslovy, which is on the eastern side of the Oskol River. Meanwhile, moving on out of that area of the front and further on down and into the Severonsky Forest, we also saw more Russian soldiers being targeted and hit within the woods. We could see a rare Ural 4320. I mean, that is exceptionally rare, getting blown up.
Old thing's nasty looking junkyard dog truck right there, hideous.
Man,
oh look,
honestly,
they got the lunch boxes on the back in front of these. Oh look, a dirt bike.
Man, you're about to turn into that dude from Squid Game. Look, we'll pack a lunchbox, man. Like it.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Oh, wow. Oh.
That was a nice orange flame. Oh, and here's a UAZ 469 about to get obliterated. That thing already looked like it was destroyed anyways. And also, Avari asked, are there any survivors? Highly doubtful. The chances of that are quite slim. From what I've been able to see from the uncensored footage we don't show on air, most of the explosives on these drones can only be described as overkill. Usually something along the lines of 2 hand grenades strung together, at least at a minimum, of explosive force. A human body just cannot survive the shock of a grenade exploding at point-blank range. Very rare that that's not the case. So just from overpressure alone, most people will usually end up dying from internal injuries, but also due to the explosive force as well. Most of them are pretty much just killed outright from the explosion itself, especially considering that it's a direct impact onto their body with about 2 grenades worth of force. And when I'm saying grenades, I mean something like the M61 frag grenade, which is the standard one, actually kind of the standard one that we use here in the United States right here. So about 2 of those put together, and that's hitting directly onto someone. So usually the chances of survival from that are practically non-existent. We also did get to see Ukrainian artillery of the 60th Mechanized Brigade doing its work out here. Now this is actually quite rare. We haven't seen this a lot. But from what we can tell, the Ukrainians in this instance are actually using spotter drones to guide in artillery fire. This used to be quite common at the beginning of the war, but these days the Ukrainians have pretty much moved entirely to drones because they're cheaper and far more efficient than even the simple HE shell that most artillery guns fire. But in this clip, the 60th Mechanized is actually using artillery to target this Russian group.
I thought the reason why they had stopped using drones to target like this is because the Russians were able to track back the signal all the way back to their artillery spot, and that's why they just had stopped doing it for a while.
To some degrees, that did happen in the past. He would just follow the drone back to wherever it came from. But nowadays, we understand that Ukrainian tactics have evolved, and usually spotters are in completely different locations than the actual artillery battery. So it mitigates the risk to the whole artillery battery if they were to use spotters like that. So an evolution of tactics in a sense. Meanwhile, though, down near the area of the general Donbass, or generally the Kupiansk-Pokrovsk front, we did get to see the special forces of Ukraine striking and destroying Russian logistics forces behind the lines with their longer-range drones, including what appears to be some sort of a mobile radar right there.
Also, by the way, speaking of that hit inside of Chechnya that we saw in the FSB headquarters, also the Akhmat got hit today as well. I'm not sure if you saw that post, but the Akhmat got smashed by the Ukrainians as well.
Oh, nice. That's pretty good. Was it like a training school again or something like that?
I'll have to go back and go take a look here. I think it was like the Akhmat's, like one of their remote headquarters or something like that in Chechnya, but I'll tell you in just a second.
But that is the end of that clip, and it does appear the special forces were successful. Meanwhile, moving on from that and on towards the area of Poltavka, we also get to see the Ukrainians taking out even more of the Russians. This was done by the 5th Brigade, the Phoenix. And here's a Russian position. And here's a Russian man. You see them flying on the ground, trying to find.
Yeah, it was the Akhmat regiment's base in Gudermis in Chechnya. So yeah, they got smashed right in the middle of it right there. The Akhmat got caught eating the ham and cheddar again.
Man, I got to tell you, Don, things are not going well, Don. Oh, look at this guy. Oh, he's trying to dodge it. That never works. And we can also see this drone coming in as well. And seeing a Russian in the reeds. I mean, you see this one flying through a building, as a matter of fact. You know, I remember back in the day when Ukrainian drones couldn't fly in buildings because the signal wasn't good enough, or they hadn't developed a way to get the signal into the building for the drone to fly around. So generally people were relatively safe within the buildings, or soldiers were. Nowadays that's not the case. Every Ukrainian drone, fiber optic or not, can fly right into a building. It's the little things, folks, the marginal improvements that actually make the big differences. Well, you see this one actually flying under a tree to get this Russian who was taking a nap right here. Like, literally a nap, I'm not even kidding. But we can now see the next one, trying to find more Russians. I gotta tell you, folks, I remember back in the day, like, I sit here and think these days a lot about the beginning of the war. The war at the beginning was a totally different conflict than it is right now. Back in the day, infantry firefights were largely the norm, and drone activity was actually considered to be something incredibly new. It was basically like the emergence of the machine gun on the battlefields of World War I. And nowadays, it is really the only way that the Ukrainians engage the Russians is through drone actions, which is generally an indirect fire. They hardly ever engage in infantry firefights any longer, at least from what we can see. It's mostly all drone-based. We also saw more Russian soldiers being taken out by drone by the 38th Separate Marine Brigade within Mirnohrad. Oh, this guy was riding a bike. Oh.
Like a little scooter or something.
And these guys are riding another bike. That's a dirt bike, actually. And, oh, that didn't turn out well for them. Vadim. Here goes another guy. Man, they're extinguishing those Russian flags above their head. I wonder why. Oh, he's kind of like mogging it, honestly. But anyways, that's the end of the clip, and it does appear that the 38th was once again continuing to inflict casualties on the Russians. We also saw more Russians getting hit and crossed by, believe it or not, the 68th Jaegers and their drone forces. Back in the day, folks, combat footage was very much varied. You would watch clips from the 3rd Brigade, the 92nd, the famous Fighting 93rd, and multiple other different brigades and artillery units. Then you would see them conducting artillery fire, infantry firefights, usually direct armored assaults on trenches. Basically, all of that's gone. It's the craziest thing to think about how the tactics have evolved so much and so far in just 4 years. Everything is drone-based now. Even infantry engagements have a decent amount of drone support on the ground now in the drone gun carriers. It's just the wildest thing to think about. It truly is like World War I with the amount of innovation in technology and tactics that's being done.
Yeah, it really is.
We also see that they did hit the little Russian ammo cache in that building. It's now on fire and burning rapidly. You know, man, honestly, man, whoever thought up this idea, and I wish we would know who the person was. We ought to take a drone and put a cradle on the bottom of it where it can drop a bomb. Whoever came up with that idea basically is the hero maxim of our time as far as weapons development goes for infantry. Moving on down the line, we also got to see some Russian systems getting destroyed down here as well by the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Forces, including this acquisition radar of an S-300. And also this Nobi radar station. You can actually see the Russians on the ground down there trying to fire at the drone, but they missed, and so they're going to get the radar. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. And here goes another radar. Another Nobi. Look at that. And that's the end of the clip. But with that, folks, that is all of the frontline footage that we have for the day. And now, folks, it's time for us to move on into the rest of our news, which is the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. I actually did put a link for a speech from Zelensky, but it really isn't a speech. It's more of a press conference, and also it wasn't really that good of a format as well. It was the one with the Ukrainian dub over Zelensky speaking English, and then they also had the sign language translator on the side. Usually a lot of people consider that to be incredibly distracting, not only the dub, but also the sign language translator. So we are not going to show it, but if you would like to see it, you can click on the link in the description below and you can go and watch it. Nevertheless, we are going to be moving on into the second segment of the stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And so, without further ado, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so taking us into the final question segment of the night. We are fresh out of polls, and it's time to jump right back into our Super Chat questions proper. And our first one of the last segment goes to Wubba Real. And Wubba puts in a $20 support, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And also, by the way, I was going to go back and check something here. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know why it says Wubba Real. Like, that's interesting right there. That's that new YouTube handle right there. But I know him as Wubba. And thank you very much, Wubba, for that support. And he said, coffee is better in the mountains.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And the coffee is better in the mountains, I tell you. As I says, coffee is great. Coffee is good. And coffee was pretty okay tonight. I mean, it tasted like black coffee to me. I always have black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just pike roast, ground up and then brewed. It's very good. I honestly like it quite a good deal. And I gotta thank you greatly for the support. And speaking of that today, folks, today was an interesting day. There are so many interesting places and things to see here in this great Salt Lake. In this Salt Lake City, what they call it. They call it a city near the Salt Lake. Would you believe that? Near a Salt Lake and everything. But, you know, I gotta tell y'all, folks, growing up in Alabama's, you just don't realize what you're missing. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't. We realized that a little bit today, as a matter of fact. Matthew, I don't think that would be an OPSEC violation to chit-chat about what we did today, do you think?
Probably not.
Probably not, honestly. But I gotta say, it's something quite interesting. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's just a crazy sort of a thing here. We went to this place down here. We saw it on the interstate, passing by it. Let me see if I can find it here. It must be up here. Yeah, this place right here, Shields. Never heard of it before. I don't know if this is a common thing out here in the West, but they had like a weapons expo style gun store on the second floor, and they had the craziest stuff up there. They actually had a SIG spear, which I couldn't believe. I've never seen one of those in real life until I went in there today, and I was like, oh my god, so they got a SIG spear. It was crazy, and they had all kinds of other stuff in there too. Literally anything you could have imagined, they had it in there. And I was like, oh my god, this is crazy, because you just wouldn't think that that kind of stuff would be around, because that store, folks, that store in that one gun section had more variety of guns, ammunition, and accessories that you could get for the guns than practically all of the gun stores in Alabama combined. And also a whole bunch of other stuff that Alabama didn't have. They had an entire section dedicated to Lego, and I think they had like every Lego kit in the catalog in there. I've never seen that before either. We didn't even have a Lego store in Alabama. So I was like, this is just crazy. I mean, like, the kind of stuff people have out here in Salt Lake, truly, truly incredible. But with that, I hope that it does say a little bit about, all that stuff that was going on today. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
All right, so our next super chat goes to North Rhine-Westphalian, and thank you very much as well for that $20 support and also helping to keep the channel running. And he said, it's not about democracy or drug cartels, it's about oil power and control. And Venezuela has the heavy crude U.S. refineries need, and sanctions cut that off, so regime change suddenly looks convenient. Well, now, North Rhine, I've heard the oil argument a lot, and oil may play a part in it, but I think it's more than that. I truly think it is the Chinese influence is the main reason they're down there, and not only the Chinese influence. I just saw that apparently, at least according to what I'm seeing here on Twitter, that the Secretary of State is once again saying that Venezuela is apparently a new foothold of Iran, saying that the Iran, the IRGC, and even Hezbollah have a presence in South America, meaning inside of Venezuela. So I think that's what mainly they're going for right now is that, but they're trying to make it seem like it's all about stopping drugs, which I just don't buy that. I don't think many people really actually buy that in the first place, because there's so many countries that sell drugs out of South America. It's basically all of them at the top region right there. They all have cartels operating there. So it's not just Venezuela. So I think it's about foreign influence personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, let me see here if I can try and find this really quickly, folks. Yeah, that's not really a lot. The thing with that, though, is that is supposed on the analysis that we had a huge trade with the Russians for oil, and now that that's cut off, we're having to find some substitute for that. And that would seem like a decent conclusion to make. Correlation equals causation, but correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, because if we look at the U.S. Energy Information Administration, which is a government website here, which actually tracked our barrel-to-barrel trade with the Russians, apparently by month, you can actually see that in the peak month we ever had historically with the Russians, which is May of 2021, we bought 26,171 thousand barrels over the course of the month of May, which isn't really that big of an amount, actually. That would be about roughly, if we're talking about 26,171 thousand barrels, that would be about 261,070. Oh, actually, yeah, that would be 261,710 barrels of oil in a month. Now, if we look at how much oil the U.S. consumes, how much oil does U.S. consume daily? Let me see here. We consume 20.25 million barrels of oil a day. So we're consuming about roughly 70-something billion barrels of oil a month. So considering that we only got 260,000 of that, 267,000 barrels of oil from Russia at the peak month, basically they were non-existent in the American market, generally as an importer. So with their oil disappearing, a lot of companies are just going to substitute that with a slightly, marginally more expensive option of buying from the Middle East. And when I say it's marginally expensive, barrels of crude are bought and sold at a flat standard rate across the world. A $68 barrel of oil in Russia is $68 in Saudi Arabia, same as it is $68 in America. It is a flat rate. It rises and decreases, but it rises and decreases globally. So buying the oil from Saudi Arabia or the Middle East or somewhere else around there, the only difference in the cost is the cost in shipping, which probably isn't even going to be that much more because the same distance is being traveled from both markets. So they generally just replace that smaller amount with, say, something along the lines of Saudi Arabian or some sort of Middle Eastern crude instead of the stuff we got from Russia. So I generally say that it isn't necessarily about the oil. I think that it may legitimately be about the cartels, as silly as that seems, because I don't know how in the world we're ever going to deal with the cartels. Did the U.S. government deal with the mafia by bombing them? No, they never did, actually. Did we deal with them through legal warfare? Yes. Are they gone? No, and they never will be. Same as the cartels. As long as there's always a demand, or as long as there's always a criminal knack in people, there's always going to be some sort of a criminal organization or a criminal outfit. The cartels are always going to exist. We can try and limit them as much as we can, but it's going to be completely impossible to really do anything to them, especially considering that they're not inside of our country. All that we can do is trying to intercept the drugs before they make it into America. So at the border, so you could increase the amount of border patrol officers, or you could increase the size of the Coast Guard significantly and have more coastal patrols being conducted, even those that include anti-submarine patrols, considering that there are narco subs that we do know of that are completely submersible, although exceptionally rare. So we could do those two things, and that would honestly would probably be more cost efficient, effective, and also not have the diplomatic fallout that's going to happen because of what we're doing down there. But I do see why you're making the oil argument. It's just that when you really look at the stats, it doesn't really exist in a way that supports the idea that there was a huge reason that we're supplanting the Russian market by invading Venezuela's. And even still, we would have to bring all of that oil to be extracted in the first place from where they are in the ground up to the top to be put on a tanker in the first place. And a lot of Venezuela's oil reserves are completely untapped, meaning that would take even further years of us trying to generally build up those oil fields to actually extract anything from them. So it'd be a lot easier for us to go to the oil sands of, say, Saudi Arabia or somewhere and just buy from them, because they're already extracting and at large volumes, and they're always more than happy to sell. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Plausible idea, but I think crazily enough, they're actually basing this foreign policy initiative off of going against the cartels, which I just don't really understand how that's ever going to pan out or succeed. But anyways, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a support from Damian McClay, who put in a $10 donation. And thank you, Damian, as well for that 10 and also helping to keep us on the air. And we also had a $6 support from Mark Andre Burnett, longtime channel legend just like Damian. And thank you both, Mark and Damian, for helping to get the channel on the air. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a humongous thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but we are still massively appreciative of y'all's support because y'all help us to keep this channel running and make this thing possible day in and day out. If it wasn't for folks like y'all, where in the world would we be? Well, we wouldn't be able to be on air, that's for sure. And I got to thank y'all massively once again for enjoying this channel enough that y'all will go out of your way to support it, because folks like y'all really do help this channel to be a reality every single day. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from James Dolan. And thank you, James, as well for that support. He said, what's the odd one out, friend or foe? Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, Ukraine. And Ukraine is the only one of these countries the West will sell arms to. Enough said. Mike Druck, bro. I'm not sure if I understand. Like, do you understand what he's saying?
I don't really understand it either, unfortunately.
I think he's saying, let's see here, the West... Well, I'm not sure if I understand, James. I think maybe it's like passing by us, maybe, or something like that. Maybe there was like a typo or something. But we would never sell weapons to any of our enemies, which is Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran, ever, because those are our enemies. So Ukraine's not really in that category because Ukraine's an ally of the West. So, you know, and I'm not really sure what you meant. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think I'm kind of seeing what James is getting at, but I'm not exactly sure. So James, if you're still here, please clarify what your super chat meant in the live chat, and we'll circle back to it once you send that in. We'll be looking in the live chat for it, because I think I'm kind of getting what you're saying is, obviously everyone else is our foes and Ukraine is our only friend, because you said what's the odd one out, friend or foe? And obviously Ukraine is our friend, and they're the ones we sell weapons to. So if that is what I'm understanding the statement to be, then I would agree. Ukraine is clearly a friend, and we would never sell weapons to any of the other countries, clearly making them our foe. And I guess if that's what you're going for, I would definitely agree with that 100%. But please let us know what you were actually meaning by that, because I'm still thinking I might be missing the mark on what exactly that meant. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Basically, it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help it to keep rolling day in and day out. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have an $8 support from Chase Meddy. And Chase Meddy said, Lego and guns. Sounds like a dream. And I love Lego. Honestly, you got to have a big budget these days to love Lego. Lego's gotten expensive. I haven't looked at Lego in a very long time. In fact, a very, very long time. I'm talking about years. And Lego has gone up in price a lot. Like I'm seeing the sets out there for like 150 to 200 plus. I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, who's buying Lego that costs this much? It's cool looking stuff, but it's expensive though. But Enforcer, what say you?
Al, I'm trying to remember how much the Lego sets we got back in the day were, because we had a couple of them. I was a big person into building like the Lego, not the Lego City kits, but the Lego City kits, if y'all know what I'm talking about, like the actual built-up city buildings. I think those things used to cost about $250, so I think they're still around the same price. But Lego has got some insane stuff on their calendar these days. Well, not their calendar, but their catalog these days. Let me see if I can show y'all a couple of them. I'll go to the Lego website here, because y'all just wouldn't believe what they're coming out with these days. Lego has moved pretty much completely away from being like a kid's toy producer, and they pretty much moved entirely into like the adult market of just marketing and selling stuff to adults. And let me see here if I can go to, let's see here, age, we'll go with 18 plus, because that seems to be where everything, yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely insane stuff, like this Lamborghini Countach 5000, $179, but it's at 1,500 parts, and I mean, it does look just like a Lamborghini Countach would. Is that how you pronounce it, Matthew?
Yeah, Countach, it's close enough.
Okay, yeah, good. And then they have like Anonymous, and I mean, they just have absolutely insane stuff. I just never seen it. Like, they even have the USS Enterprise now from Star Trek: The Next Generation. I mean, this stuff would have been
It's sold out. Like they sold out of a $400 Lego set. That's crazy work. I mean, who's got $400 to spend on Lego in this economy? I'm being serious about that.
I mean, honestly, and then they even have a Game Boy, and it looks like it actually kind of like almost runs. Like, I just like Lego has moved far beyond what it was when we were kids. Because I remember when we were kids, the craziest stuff in their catalogs was the stuff that we would get seldom, like the Emporium. You know, the Emporium, Matthew, and like the cinema and the town hall and
Yeah.
everything. Like, those were the craziest things in their catalog. Nowadays, that would be like a mid-ranged item at this point with what they have. We even saw a freaking Titanic model that ends up being hell. It's like almost 5 feet long when it's completed. It's 8,000 pieces. It's like just absolutely insane stuff that they have these days. Let me see if a motorized lighthouse. What do they mean? So the light actually works. Like this kind of stuff is just crazy. Like that would have never existed when we were kids. They just moved completely on from what they used to be. They moved into something else entirely. I'm not complaining though. I mean, honestly, a lot of it's pretty cool looking. But I mean, it's just what a change really for a company. They have like the Concorde. I'm trying to see if I can find this particular. Oh yeah, this one was pretty interesting. The shuttle carrier. Like it's just insane stuff. Like it's like, wow, Lego is this. And they are. Like, this is entirely what they do these days. Like, the other stuff, like Lego City and all those sorts of things, those are like the side topics now. Those aren't their main markets, apparently. They focus primarily on this. There it is! The Lego Titanic. This thing, folks, is 9,090 pieces. And I think when it's done, it's roughly about, like, 5 feet long in length. So this is literally like one of those massive wooden carved ships in size that someone would buy to put on a table. That's basically that, but the whole thing's Lego. Unreal.
And it only costs one very large car payment.
Yeah, you know, it only costs about rent. Like, it only costs about the cost of rent.
Whoa, what the?
Oh my god.
Oh, it's got an engine in it. It's got 2 engines.
With actual working propellers. I mean, that's honestly, man, this is like, also, the fact that Lego has a budget to make an animation like this to sell this thing, that's also insane, too. I mean, dude, Lego's, like, turning into, like, its own, like, small, like a major toy manufacturer. Not even a toy manufacturer anymore. But also, look at the length of this thing. 53 inches. That's actually 5 feet long.
That is crazy. I'll admit the creativity is really cool, but I mean, $700. I mean, come on now. It's like, where's the cost coming from? Like, it's plastic, number one, so that's not very expensive. They have to design it and pay designers. I get that's probably costly, but I'm like, you're just putting different pieces in a box. It's like, how is it $700? I mean, that's crazy.
I don't even know. Like, I have no clue. But Lego's always been known to be kind of pricey, actually, if I remember correctly. Even when we were kids, everyone was like, dang, Lego is pricey. You can't get a lot of Lego. But, you know, I guess with inflation these days, it's just looking insanely expensive. But I will say though, like the kits are not bad at all, but it is quite expensive. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And a huge thanks to y'all, to you so much once again for support and bringing up the fact that them having like every Lego on the planet is pretty cool, because it is pretty cool. I don't know if I'd ever be able to afford them, but it is cool nonetheless. That is one thing that I would say for sure. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And also, before Amanda Brada said Lego is also a movie studio. Really? I didn't know that. Let me go pull it up.
It's also a war strategy too. Ukraine's been begging Russia to let go of Donbass for a long time.
Let's see here. I can't.
That one fell
Legos.
on deaf ears. Hold on a second. Hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on. There we go.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I was distracted trying to pull up something, man. If it was a good joke, I was completely missing it because I was trying to pull up this Lego Studio thing. But oh, so wait. Okay. So apparently, Lego Studios was a line of toys that they made, but it was made out of Lego. So, interesting. I didn't know that. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And whoa, what the hell? What was that? There's like a light shining in the back of my head there for a second. Well, somebody got the scope on me or something. What's
Man,
going on back there?
It's the
I
ops.
tell you, the ops just pulled out that beam and put it on me, I'll tell you. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Robert Krogan, who puts into 5. And Robert said, "Good evening, LSA, and enforcers, have a chicken on me."
Hey, and thank you so much for the $5 Costco chicken. You gotta love those Costco chickens, I tell yous. And I gotta thank you greatly for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to buy those Costco chickens. And we wouldn't be able to keep ourselves fed, keep the lights on, and keep everything else running. So big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we will have a Costco chicken on you, sir. Thank you. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bennett LSA, who puts in the 5. And he said, "I missed the last 2, but how many more Bobcats did we get? And also, do you think Russians think of the air defenses that Putin staged around Moscow that failed?" And LSA.
And we got another one today. Oh, we got another Bobcat skid steer. And as far as the air defenses around Moscow, the Ukrainians do think about them time to time. They think about them a lot, actually, how to get around them. But yeah, they do think about them from time to time, you know. And let me see here. Let me make sure. Let's see, how many Bobcats did we get? Let's see, of the stage round. I would say, speaking about the Russians, because I was wanting to make sure that I was getting that question correct, I would say that the Russians and what they think of the air defense, they probably think that it sucks. I mean, honestly, I think everyone in Russia knows that their stuff sucks, but they can't really say that because then the FSB will come and put you into the shadow prison, aka the Gulag out in Siberia. So I would bet you that they all think that it sucks, because there's been a very bad track record, even in Moscow and basically everywhere else, of any air defenses ever successfully working. So I think they all kind of get an idea the weaponry isn't that good these days. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, Bennett LSA. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this possible and keep it running. And also, I just saw someone say that apparently these Shields stores, Shields, I don't know what it's called, but these stores that we were just talking about are actually fairly common, which I find very hard to believe, folks, because I've never heard of this thing in my life, like this store right here. Some people in the chat were like, "Oh, this thing is like super common. They're basically in every city in America." Well, they weren't in Alabama. I tell you, like they were not in Alabama. I think the biggest store that we had in Alabama was probably Costco. Like, no joke, that was probably the biggest store that we had. The next biggest one would be like a Walmart or a Sam's Club, but that was basically the very peak of goods that you could purchase in Alabama were from Costco, Sam's, or Best Buy. Generally nothing else. And if there were specialty stores, like gun stores or anything else, usually their selections were fairly slim. Now, there was one store, though, in Alabama that actually had a pretty varied collection and actually had some really crazy stuff coming out of it. Speaking of gun stores, there was one, and they were the cat's meow of the state, but the rest of them practically had nothing. And usually most of their guns, like what was crazy is that in like Shields, like Matthew, you saw this today, the guns would be on average $2,000 and up. In most Alabama gun stores, the guns would be about $1,000, maybe $1,500 and lower.
Oh yeah. Now, let me give y'all the lowdown on it real quick. Let me give you the lowdown. This place was so Gucci. They had Terran Tactical they were selling in there. And if you know anything about that company, I've never seen Terran Tactical being sold anywhere in a store, literally anywhere I've gone to for gun stores. This place had, like, I think 10 different models of Terran in the store, which is insane. It's like these custom guns that are, like, made by a fella. I don't know where their manufacturing place is, but they're really fancy. Their guns have been in John Wick, the movie, and all kinds of stuff like that. And they're also pretty pricey too. I think like $2,000 for like a pistol, and like all the way up to like 7,000 or 8,000. But they had them in there, and I was looking at them behind the thing, thinking, "What in the world? Like they've got these guns in a store? Like that's crazy. You would have never seen that, even used in Alabama at a gun store. You'd have never seen that. So that was kind of surprising too. Also, the fish tank too. This is like a more Gucci version of Bass Pro, I think.
Also, here's the gun area, and this looks like a weapons expo, honestly, compared to anything that we ever saw in Alabama. In Alabama, our gun stores usually were a smaller building, never really well kitted out. Like they never had like this really crazy looking presentation. Usually it was just like gun racks on the wall, nothing else, and then the guns would be up there. And that would be it. And also, you would never be allowed to get out here in the wide open and just stand at them and grab them. Because these, in shields, you can literally pick them up and hold them, like if you want to, without anyone having to grab them from behind a counter for you. Which is insane, because that never happened in Alabama. The reason why, I'll tell y'all, is that in Alabama, if you gave a lot of people that kind of opportunity, there are going to be certain folks who would just run in there and probably yank it and then run out with it, and then that would end up being a huge issue in terms of lost product and also crime. So generally that never exists in Alabama. You would literally have to ask someone at a counter, "Hey, can you grab that for me and let me look at that?" And then they would grab it for you and look at it. Here, they had them on like those little bendy, you can actually see them right there. I don't know what they are, but they're like the little plastic bendy cables. And you could pick them up and you could hold them if you wanted to and take a look at it, aim down the sights and everything and see if you liked it, which is unheard of in Alabama. And it was huge. I mean, it like went on forever. Back there in that little corner, they had the SIG Spear. It was a 308 SIG Spear. It's not a 6.8. They don't have those for sale for the public, but the really crazy stuff. I mean, I was absolutely blown away by this. And apparently this is what people take the most pictures of when they come in the store, is the gun section, because it truly was unreal. I've just never seen anything like that anywhere.
Well, you know something that's crazier than the store right here is I saw a video yesterday. It was some guy here in Utah. He was actually here in Salt Lake City, like somewhere. I can't remember the neighborhood, but he was standing in like a normal residential neighborhood that just had like normal houses in it. You know, just like maybe like 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet houses or something. They look pretty decent. The guy was staying in the street talking about, "Oh man, I've really reached the hood now. This is the hood." Like he was like all trembly in the voice and like shaky legs and stuff like that, and was being totally serious about it too. And I was like, "Is this guy serious?" I thought it was a joke at first, but then I went to the comments and saw like all these people saying, if he thinks that's a hood, then he ought to go to, you know, X, Y, and Z, like Detroit, Chicago, you know, Alabama, it's like somewhere Louisiana or something like that. That's a real hood. It is wild how out of touch people are in Utah about what a hood really looks like. There is nowhere in Utah it's a hood. Like I have not seen anywhere here that qualifies as a hood. I think some people need to get out and experience the hood to really know what they're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, what's funny is that even in Ogden, which a lot of people around here are like, "Oh, that's the ghetto." We went up. Well, I went up there. Matthew hasn't really gone up there recently yet since we moved here. He's eventually going to, though. We're both going to go up there. But even Ogden is like super nice. Like compared to Alabama, and I'm not like dissing on Alabama, but at the same time, it's really crazy because we grew up in Alabama, folks, our entire lives. We were born and raised in the state. That's really all we knew. And then you come out here, and it's a totally different sort of an animal in every way. Just insane. I mean, the kind of stuff that's here, it's unreal. And also at the price, like crazily enough, Salt Lake City with all this stuff, it is still marginally cheaper than living in Birmingham, Alabama, which makes no sense at all when you think about it. It's like, so they have a well fleshed out public transport system with a train that'll take you everywhere, cheap as dirt. Public transport that will take you literally everywhere, even up into the mountains to go skiing. You have all of these crazy sorts of stores, all of these crazy things to do. Just endless stuff. We haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg yet on Salt Lake City and everything that's here. Crazy food options. Never have seen some of these before in my life. Like South Korean food. that I don't even think existed in Birmingham. I never found one, at least while I was there. And all of that exists here. And also the people are by and large a lot nicer. Now I have seen one or two people that have road raged here, so that's kind of similar. Like there is that like bad egg element, like there will be everywhere, but it's not close to as big as it was in Alabama, which it's just a really crazy sort of a thing. Like, coming from Alabama, folks, I was joking with Matthew today. I was saying I feel like one of those immigrants that come from like a third world country, and then they come to America and they're telling everyone how grateful and appreciative they should be of everything that they have because they might not have anything. And at least for America, going from Alabama to Utah here, it really does feel like it's a completely different world, like a completely different country. Just in a really nice one at that. I really wish, folks, that Alabama could be that way, because we're from there, so I would love for Alabama to be like that. Hopefully one day it will turn into that, but I just don't know. Maybe one day it'll happen. But the South is
Yeah.
the South. It doesn't really get a lot of options to get ahead like that. Most industries that move down there are manufacturing, so there's not a huge amount of money to be made in manufacturing. That's bottom of the mill, not final assembly stuff that really does make the money. So we'll
The
see.
good news is though that Birmingham's no longer the murder capital. At least that's positive news. It's still at the top like 10 or something like that. But Jackson, Mississippi is now the murder capital. They've taken the place now for that. So it's just a shame. Like my definition of a hood is if you see individuals walking down the street with like Dracos, like openly carrying like Dracos that are clearly loaded, and they seem to be like looking at cars and stuff like that, like they're up to no good. That's a hood. Like if there are people carrying around rifles like that down the street, that's my definition of it. If you're in like a place with like nice houses and the lawns are being kept up nice and stuff like that, that's not a hood. And that seems to be what Utahns call a hood. Is that? I'm like, no, that is not a hood. That is not. It just looks like it's not super well kept, and that's not the definition of a hood.
I mean, probably the worst place that we've seen in Salt Lake City would be like the Midvale area, or kind of like Midvale Murray around here, like this little area around the interstate. That's probably the worst area, but I would say that that's like mid-range Birmingham. Like that's not even close to being extremely bad Birmingham. Extremely bad Birmingham was literally like burned down buildings, completely abandoned for blocks upon blocks, and usually gangs running those blocks, and they would easily get into shootings often. This area here, I mean, it was like it's like the best way I could describe it, kind of like oh Matthew, what is it? It's like the area just north of Homewood, like kind of getting towards downtown Birmingham, sort of like that little
It's
stretch.
like It's like in Midvale, it's like people that want to act like thugs, but they're really like not really about that life, if you know what I'm saying. There's like they're trying to act like they're tough. I don't even know why. It's like, why are you acting like that? It's like this place is not the hood. It's like there's not like a real gang culture like that in this area. There's no gang culture like that. So they're acting like they're in a gang for whatever reason. I don't have any idea. But I mean, even at that, they're soft. Even at that, it's like, I don't know what you're doing. Because if you went anywhere else where there was actual like gangs and stuff like that, they'd be crying in like 30 seconds because I'm like, you'd find out real quick that you're not like that.
Yeah, I mean, and also I saw Foster say, yeah, I've seen people call ghetto neighborhoods with reasonably well kept lawns and houses, call them ghetto because they were just not the nicest neighborhood. I think that's what people do around here in Salt Lake City. Like, whenever people in Salt Lake City, because Matthew talks about the forums on the internet of the Salt Lake Cityans and how they complain about certain things, like, oh, the roads aren't well kept, or, the crime's kind of high. And really, like, I'm honestly, folks, about to be like one of those immigrants from like Ireland or elsewhere, like from back in the 1800s. You don't know how great you have it, and all that stuff. It could be worse, like you could be from Alabama. Man, honestly, man, why in the world did they like turn in like Simon the Whistler there at the end of that sentence, man? I was like, you could be in
I'm in the
Alabama.
Whistler.
Yeah, yeah, Simon Whistler. You know that guy?
No, no.
The travel guy, the cool dude. Like he's the
Are you talking
cool.
about Simon Wilson?
Yeah, that guy, the cool travel dude. Like the guy
Oh,
who's
okay,
like,
I got
man,
you.
like I sat there and said, "You could be in Alabama," and I was like, "Bro, that sounded just like him, honestly." But anyways, I honestly, folks around here have it great. Everyone's going to complain about stuff, I guess, but if they grew up and lived where we were in Alabama, they would be a lot more appreciative of where they are at in life, I think, because it is truly a different level. Like even the schools around here, and also another thing, like Matthew and me have noticed this, and I brought it up to him. Kids travel around freely in the city without any parents around. That was never heard of in Alabama. If you were unaccompanied by an adult in Alabama, there was a high chance that someone was going to rob you, stab you, or do something worse to you. So you had to be accompanied by an adult everywhere. Hardly anyone got out and did anything as kids unless we were right around your house or right with your parents. Here, kids travel around all over the place, and apparently it's got to be safe enough, or because they're doing it in droves. And if it wasn't safe, they wouldn't be doing that because their parents wouldn't want them to get hurt. So I was just like, wow. I was like, that's like totally like it's literally like living in a different country. I've just never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, it really is, honestly. It's just nice to be in a place where you can get out and walk the streets and things like that and feel like you're not going to get shot and killed. Like, it really is nice. It's a shame how many American cities have turned into that, like just turned into an absolute danger zone, basically. Like a lot of downtowns, you can't even get out and walk around anymore. It's gotten that dangerous in most places. I mean, some people want to turn a blind eye to it. Some people want to be ignorant to it and pretend like everything's okay. And then they end up walking the streets and then something bad happens. And they're like, why'd this happen to me? It's like, well, you went down the most dangerous street in downtown, so if you knew what was good for you, you wouldn't have gone there in the first place. So there's nowhere like that here. Like even in the places that's kind of like a little bit on the sketchy side, like Midvale, it's still not like that even there, and that's considered a bad spot for Salt Lake City. And it is a little bit more run down than the other spots, but it's still nice, like in the comparison to other places. So it's just a shame. Like I really hate to say it too, because me personally, I still like obviously have like a certain spot in my mind for Alabama because that is where I grew up. But at the same time, though, I'm not going to turn a blind eye to what it's turned into. It's turned rough, and nobody seems to really want to take it to the next level like they do in other states like Utah.
Yeah, and before, because I already see some people doing this in the chat, before you try and bring politics into the equation, Alabama and Utah generally lean the same way politically. It's just it's more so the actual administration of the states, or more so the opportunities that Utah got that Alabama didn't get, that really kind of differentiates the two in what they do. Very just the weirdest thing, honestly. And I would also have to agree with Matthew on the whole Alabama deal. Like we dissed on Alabama a lot, and we kind of still do. But Alabama is our home state. That's what we actually know and we grew up with. And it's just so sad to actually move out of there and see that Alabama really is at the bottom, kind of like at the bottom of the rung, really, as far as states go. And it's really crazy to think the whole South was like that. I mean, it didn't really change much, really, wherever you went. Like Mississippi is worse. Georgia is better, but only in some forms. Florida is a whole animal on its own. You're either a multi-billionaire in Florida or you're dirt poor. There really is no in between.
Florida's crazy, honestly. Like most people don't expect it because most people think of Florida as like a retirement place. Some parts of Florida are worse than even the worst spots of Louisiana, which is kind of hard to believe. I mean, there's some rough places in Louisiana, like some really rough places, even way worse than Alabama. But like Florida, like it's kind of shocking. Like some places inland Florida, like off the coast, it gets like you look at it and you think, what is this? It almost looks like a foreign country almost, like with the way how dilapidated it is. Nothing's being kept up, and it looks like hell. Like you're like, what the hell? It's like I didn't even know this was in Florida, but there's a lot of places down there it's like that. Shockingly, I didn't find that out until we went on that area to go. We went to go look in Florida. We went to go look in Seattle, for places to move to, and I was shocked by what Florida looks like in some places. Like I was really shocked. I didn't know it looked like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy because we with Florida, if you ever go there on vacation, you get this idea in your head about what Florida is. So generally everyone who goes to Florida, they're either going to Destin, Fort Walton, 30A, which is this highway along the beach to Panama City, or they're kind of going to Pensacola, or they're going to the East Coast, generally Miami, but some people also go to the St. Augustine in Jacksonville or Tampa. So you kind of get this a bit of an idea of what it looks like because of the very nice touristy places. But even if you go 3 miles back off of the beach in those touristy areas, it gets rough quick, very rough, very quick. And it's like, damn. It's like, so this, I would say that the whole state of Florida and their economy is literally held up only by the tourism industry. If it wasn't for tourism, I think that Florida as a state economically would most likely collapse. I don't know the actual GDP figures of where most of their money comes from as a state, but I have a feeling it's highly likely mostly tourism, and about nothing else. So very crazy state. And then Tennessee's a mixed bag. Memphis is truly the worst place in the South, in my opinion, having driven through there on the way to get here. That was actually far worse than Birmingham. God bless the folks who live in Memphis. Y'all have it rough. Like y'all can take the crown from Birmingham for worst city in the South. Memphis is definitely quite rough.
And we drove into the worst side of it in the middle of the night too. And literally, nothing. We weren't thinking a thing about it. We literally drove straight into the middle of like the worst part of the hood in Memphis at night, the worst possible time you could show up there. I literally pulled my car up, literally right there on the block. You literally had like women working in the night, stuff like that. I was just sitting right there in the middle of it. I was like, I'm waiting on, my brother to come down here with the Penske truck here in a minute. He's getting gas right in the middle of the freaking hood down the street. And I'm like just waiting for him to come through. But honestly though, like nobody messed with us, obviously. And also I'm like, if there was trouble, I'm getting out of there. I'm not waiting to see if I can get into a gunfight or something like that. I'm simply getting out of there. But it was rough, bad rough down there near the airport area. That's a tough area of Memphis.
Oh yeah, and Nashville isn't too bad. Nashville's comparable very much to Atlanta. Some areas are really bad, and then some of them are very posh. Nashville's generally the same as Atlanta. I don't know anything about Knoxville, and I know that Pigeon Forge was really cool when we were kids, and then it's really turned into a tourist trap now, and it really doesn't have a lot special going for it, which is very sad because it used to be very Appalachian. Even with the whole touristy thing going on, it was still quite Appalachian. Now it just kind of seems like a theme, like a generic theme park sort of a place. So it's okay. It's not the greatest thing, but still, that's what you have surrounding Alabama, and we hardly ever left Alabama. So the farthest we'd usually go in our lives was down to the beach in Florida, maybe over to Atlanta, Georgia, or somewhere else nearby to Atlanta, over to Mississippi because we have family there historically, or up to Tennessee on a very rare occasion. So that's all we knew our whole lives was that surrounding area. And then we came out here, and then it's like, oh my God, totally different in all those places, really. I mean, like any place in the South that we went to, put it up against Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is going to win in every metric, every way, every time. And I don't know what the rest of the cities are like out here, because apparently a lot of people have very good things to say about Boise around here. Everyone's like, oh, go to Boise. And now I'm
Boise?
Joyzy, go to Joyzy, go down to the village. But anyways, go to Boise. Man, you know what I was about to do, man. I was doing like that Frosty the Snowman thing, but go up to Boise, like, and everyone's saying that, and I'm like, what is there something interesting to see in Boise? I don't know. I've never been there. One day I want to go though now. And also, I wonder, Matthew, if Las Vegas is really as bad as they make it out to be. I think that might.
I don't know. I just have a problem with Las Vegas just because, just generally, I don't like what it's built around. Like I get it. Like I'm not one of these people. It's like, oh, if you gamble, like you're finished or something like that. I'm not like that. But at the same time, though, I don't want to live around a place that's literally built on gambling and people ruining their lives by getting addicted to gambling. I don't like that. Like, and also, I mean, there's a lot of folks who've gone there and run their whole lives, like, and doing terrible things there too, because it's known as Sin City. I just don't like it for that reason alone. I don't like the whole like aura about the place.
Yeah, I don't really like it. I'll be honest with y'all folks, I don't really like Las Vegas either. Like, people, it's a free country, people can do what they want, but I generally just don't like stuff that's kind of built on immorality, a whole deal. Like, immorality is going to exist, it's going to be a part of every city, but building the entire local economy on it, that's not really my thing. But I also see a lot of people in the chat, they're like, man, I love Texas. I never really got to see Texas. I only saw it passing through, like in the airports on connecting flights. So I never actually went into Texas much. Matthew did, and Dallas, from what Matthew said, was actually not bad. Fort Worth, but Dallas is not that bad at all. It's actually pretty nice. But Matthew said
it's nice. Texas is nice, but the thing about Texas is this, and once again, like, I'm not trying to, like, piss off. We have a lot of viewers in Texas and California, by the way, so I'm being extra nice about Texas and California. But the Texas is like a really good place to go if you want a normal, like, city suburban living situation. It is perfectly good for that. Like, it is still, their cities are nice. Like, Dallas was nice. I like their suburbs up north, really nice near Plano and places like that. But the only thing about it, though, the one thing I didn't like is it was very flat and there was not much outside of like your normal commercial businesses and commercial restaurants, like chain restaurants. That was pretty much all I saw. Now, if you go downtown, there was obviously all kinds of restaurants and food and things like that, but it was just very kind of boring. It felt very flat and very boring. There wasn't much scenery to see around the place. It was very grid-like. Salt Lake City is grid-like, but it has mountains and scenery around it that you don't get bored of, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it really is something. And also, um, oh, okay, folks, I had to find this out because you know how I was talking earlier, Matthew, about I think that the whole of Florida's economy is held up by tourism. So it actually is. They're a monolithic economy revolving around the tourism sector, basically.
Yeah, I thought as much too. It seems like fishing expeditions, like, boating, all the attractions and parks, beach. Seems like it's their main thing.
Yeah, so the tourism industry accounts for nearly 2 million jobs in the state of Florida, which is unreal. 2 million people. That's twice the size of the U.S. military in tourism jobs in Florida. That is just insane. They have a GDP of 1.6 trillion, crazily enough, as well. Which
Hmm.
honestly you wouldn't think once you go a couple of blocks off the beach in Miami and West Palm Beach. You would not think that they have an economy of 1.7 trillion. So I think we can kind of get an idea that there's a very small number of people making money in Florida, but they're making a lot of it still.
Yeah. The
Tex-
truth is, there's actually a lot of nice places to live around the United States. Like, I know some people are like, oh, the United States has just gone down. I will say for the downtowns around the country and like the actual city part of most of these places around the country, it has gone down. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. It's gotten pretty rough, but there's a lot of nice places to live. But the problem is this, though, the places that are really nice to live that you're like, oh, like, for example, if you think about like the California coast or something like that, crazy expensive. If you go to Florida and you look at the coast, crazy expensive. You look at anywhere, like, for example, like, let's say the nicer part, like the northern part of the suburbs in Texas, you're getting crazy expensive. Places like that. Also, if you look at, like, for example, like nice place in Colorado gets crazy expensive. I mean, pretty much wherever it is like really considered nice to live, it is wildly expensive to go there. One of the main principles that went into picking Salt Lake City was it's still generally affordable here compared to other places. But if you ask locals around Salt Lake City, they'll say the prices have gone through the roof, it's gotten crazy expensive, and it's overpriced. But compared to where we came from, it's not overpriced. It's actually cheaper than where we came from, believe it or not, which seems like it should be the opposite because Alabama being more expensive than Salt Lake City seems a little bit crazy, but it actually worked out that way. So it's just about affordability mainly these days. There's plenty of places to go, but whether or not you can afford it or not, that's another thing.
So this is actually something fairly interesting. On Wikipedia, they actually have a map showing every state's GDP. And you know what's crazy, folks, is that the state of Alabama actually has a larger GDP than Utah, unbelievably. It has a GDP of $321 billion versus Utah's $301 billion. Now, here's my question. If that is the case, where in the world does all the money go in Alabama? Because it doesn't seem like they make that kind of money. Like, if you look around Alabama, it looks dirt poor. But apparently they make more money. Like, let me go pull this up. Population of Alabama. Let's see. Population of Alabama, which is 5.1 million, versus the population of Utah, which is 3. Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, that's the difference. So, Alabama actually has a population of 5 million people, or actually around 5.1. Utah has a population of about 3.5 to 3.6 million people. So it's significantly smaller population across the state, yet Utah almost has a comparable GDP to Alabama. So when you do the GDP per capita figures, there's actually a lot less money being made in Alabama per citizen than there is in Utah, which is actually quite interesting. But man, one also, Matthew, this is crazy. Illinois is $1 trillion state.
Really?
Yeah,
What's their main industry?
I don't know. Let's see. Does it say anything about their economy? on this little list. Area, dimensions, elevation, population. Doesn't say anything about that at all.
Not the auto industry, is it? Like I don't think the auto industry is like that anymore in that state.
Let's see. The economy of Illinois. Let's find out. Fifth largest GDP in the country, mind you, is in Illinois. I did not know that. That's news. Let's see here. So generally, the whole state makes its money off of Chicago, actually. And let's see.
And what are they doing?
So they are home to many of the U.S.'s largest companies, and I'll actually name all of them off. Abbott Laboratories, AbbVie Inc., Allstate, Baxter International, Conagra, Crate and Barrel, Kraft Heinz, McDonald's, C&H Industrial, GE Healthcare, Aon PLC, Willis Towers Watson, Mondelez International, Motorola, United Airlines, U.S. Foods, Walgreens, and then a million others. In Wikipedia,
So wait.
I don't want to name them.
So that's kind of messed up. So for the entire company's money that it's making, they're counting the headquarters as where that money is made from all the places around the country.
I don't think so. I don't know.
It sounds like it because it's like just because the headquarters is in a state doesn't mean all the money is from that state. I mean, it's just the company is based out of there.
Actually, no. It's not counting the headquarters as making the money. They're actually counting the actual profits being made in the state in Chicago. So it's not like the whole company McDonald's. This is Chicago. Apparently, it's the money actually being made out of Chicago. But let's see here. Let's see what we can find because they're not really breaking it down like the percentages economically. Let's see here. Dang, they do not have a great deal of statistics on what makes up the biggest part of Illinois' economy.
You don't think it's the drugs, is it?
Oh hell no! It couldn't be.
I'm joking. I'm joking. By the way,
man, I was like, nah, man, they couldn't be peddling that much. Let's see here.
That wouldn't be on the books anyway. I don't think they'd be counting that like in the GDP. Like, let's see what this dealer did this weekend. What's what that one did this weekend? They probably wouldn't be doing that.
Man, let me just type in Illinois largest industry, the retail sector.
Retail.
So all the money being made in Illinois, well, not all of it, but the lion's share percentage-wise is retail.
And what are they selling? Like, that and the drugs, is it?
No, that's what they man, that's what they call custom ordering. Like that ain't that retail stuff. That's made to order. But let's see. While let's see. Highest real value added. So finance, insurance, real estate, rental, and leasing are also the other major parts of the state of Illinois economy.
So it's insurance bastards.
Apparently. So yeah.
Damn.
So, and also what's crazy, man, is that Pennsylvania, even with the nosedive they took after the coal industry collapsed and the steel industries collapsed, and a lot of other heavy industries in Pennsylvania collapsed back in the 70s and the 80s, they still are a $1 trillion state as well.
That's crazy.
To put this,
but then you have like California out there, like just taking the whopper of all of them.
Man, $4.1 trillion in one state. That's actually crazy.
That's basically a country.
That is, honestly, if you took California and you plopped it out of America and it kept that same GDP, it actually would be probably the fourth largest economy or the third on the planet. Let me go check Germany's GDP because that's the one that they would be competing for. Germany GDP.
I've heard there's an initiative where they're like bringing out like wood saws and they're trying to cut the border out of California. You know, like just they're sawing it. So that way they can just like push it off into the ocean and they're going to sail away with the $4 trillion.
So actually I found out California would be the fifth largest economy in the world. It would only be behind the United States itself, then China, then Germany, and then Japan. And then California would be its own economy at that point and the fifth largest one on the planet.
You got to love it. I tell you what, you got to love it.
You know, folks, also what's crazy here is that as far as $1 trillion states go, just to put this in comparison, Pennsylvania has as large an economy as the entire nation of Poland. Just to put that into mind, how big that is in a figure. New York State actually has the exact same GDP that Russia had when it started the war in Ukraine.
This is not really a pissing contest.
Listen, it's not a pissing contest. Man, it's just so weird to look. And also, it's even weirder, man, to see that the state of Wyoming has a GDP of $53 billion a year.
That's more than some countries out there, actually.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
Wyoming.
man, Wyoming, like it's crazy. Wyoming of all places. It's honestly, man, I love graphs and maps, folks. I can look at them forever. I won't do that to y'all tonight, but this is just a wildly interesting graph to look at, having the GDPs per state broken down on a state-to-state level. Like the fact that Massachusetts has an $800 billion GDP. Um, that's unbelievably large. I mean, that's insanely large for a state that size. But anyways, like, what's the GDP of Belgium? Anyways, like, GDP of Belgium. $664 billion. So, find a state comparable to that. 600. So, the state of Michigan actually has the same gross domestic product as the whole nation of Belgium does. Like that.
It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder, with all this money, how come our cities don't look hyper modern with all this money that we're making compared to like European countries? But I digress.
Well, I know why. Yeah, and you all know why. It's because we just I don't know. Because whenever that comes up, man, that whole deal of why don't we make the cities look nicer? There's always a group out there, man, F the city, man. It's like, and then it's never passed. So, it is what it is, I guess. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a 5. He said, "Here's for a second chicken in case I don't make it through, and still been sick 2 weeks now." Damn, Robert.
Damn.
Like, I hope you're doing all right. Like, I sounds like you're bad sick, so I hope you get better soon. I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh yeah, I've been sick like that before, and that's not easy at all. I hope that you're doing well, and thank you so much for the second Costco chicken. I hope that you're on the mend. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing rolling. And we thank you greatly for having a Costco chicken, and we hope that we're helping you pass the time while you're sick. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Slamina Evil, who puts in a 5. And he said, "Lads, if you want to see jank, guns and optics, like Sunday's Iran propaganda video, Google Arkham Games Sniper and look at the TAR-21 sniper that the devs made."
Let's see. Sniper. TR-21 is what it's called?
TAR-21.
TAR-21. Oh, now that's a name. What the hell is that? What the hell? That's like an AUG. That is a hideous AUG. Oh my god, look at that.
Well, show it so we can see it. There it is. Let's see. Oh man, that's tough.
So
in a bad way.
It's like a Tavor and an AUG had a child, and they put the scope on backwards. This is the part you're supposed to look in, not that part. And then they made the barrel the most heavyweight barrel possible. That's something you'd see on like a Nitro 500, like 2 inches thick probably. And the muzzle brake is big enough you could put that on maybe I don't know, like a 50 millimeter anti-tank gun, and it would fit. I've never seen anything like that in my life. This thing is legit cursed. In a game of all places. Ugh. Man, that's terrible. But anyways, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because I got to be honest with you, that's rough. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to the Sailors German, who puts in a 5. They said Lego will only be back when they start making Lego sets like Lego Rado and the Rapid River Village classics. And thank you for the quality news every day.
And thank you so much for the support. I actually haven't heard of those series before, but that actually is quite interesting. And maybe they will be back. I honestly think they're doing quite swimmingly right now. I thought the kits they had were really cool. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Blazoth for putting in a $4 super chat. Thank you very much, Blazoth, once again for that support. And we also had a 5 from Robert Planting, who said stay positive.
Oh, we try. Oh, we try, But I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because folks like you help to make this thing a reality and help us to keep it rolling. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $2 super chat from Elka, who said, "Today's my birthday. Stay strong, Ukraine and LSA." And also,
Hey,
happy
happy
birthday to you, Elka.
birthday.
I hope it's gone smoothly so far. And happy birthday.
And I hope that it has gone smoothly, Alka, as well. And I wish you a happy birthday. I hope that you've had an absolutely marvelous one. And I hope that you continue to have a marvelous one here watching the Enforcer show. We're happy to have you here with us tonight and enjoying the show on your birthday. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And it is now time, folks, to jump into our live chat questions proper and also grab our Morse code decoders of the night. Tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Air Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Cobra Tarek, Cy, and Brian Blairstown. And they said, the Morse says, Russia's saying no again. And how many times do we look like a fool until we say enough? And LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message. Y'all got that correct. I get congratulated to Lee Spear Signal Corps. You always get that correct all the time. Truly incredible and amazing to know that y'all get that correct. And so, with that, I gotta say, congrats to all of you once again. And with that, we are going to be moving on into the live chats. Crazily enough, folks, believe it or not, we actually got quite a lot of time tonight to address live chats. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first one goes to Jack Ragnarsson. He said, "Why would the U.S. cut all contact with the German Ministry of Defense? That worries me that the U.S. is ready to stab NATO in the back. And what are your and the enforcers' thoughts on that?" Honestly, Jack, I would say it's concerning. Why would the U.S. cut all contact? There's really no legitimate U.S. Aligned interest to do that. The only thing I can come up with, and this is simply speculation, so take it as speculation, it's not proven. I would assume that the Russians might ask them to do that. That sounds like something the Russians would want the U.S. to do, and maybe they did that as a goodwill gesture for the Russians. I'm not really sure, because why would we cut contact with the German Ministry of Defense, considering that Germany is one of America's closest allies in Europe? That doesn't make any sense to me. So either the story is incorrect, which is possible, or the U.S. is doing it maybe as a nod to Russia, as a goodwill gesture, possibly. I'm not really sure. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, I have no clue why. One thing I would say is maybe they think that the Ministry of Defense of Germany is very pro-Ukrainian, so if they contact them and talk to them about anything, they might relay that to the Ukrainians, even if the U.S. doesn't want that to happen. Or the Russians ask for, like Matthew's saying, probably one of those two. But it is quite odd to me, and I'd have to agree, an incredibly bizarre sort of inaction to occur, considering that Germany has not given us any reason or cause to cut contact with them at the moment. So, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Catalyst Destiny, who said, "Here's a question about the whole double tap war crime situation. Are they saying a war crime against a narco terror group, or did they confirm it was an innocent civilian boat?"
They don't really know at the moment. It's generally assumed to be a narco-terrorist boat that was involved. I don't know if they're going to find in the investigation that that's different, but at the moment it's still being assumed that it's a narco-terrorist boat. The issue I'm having, though, like a lot of people, is that they're not really doing a lot to be transparent with the public, rather than saying that they're transparent. By the way, speaking of transparency, they held one of the first Pentagon press briefings in a minute today, and pretty much no news agency was allowed in, and basically none of them were allowed to, well, actually, literally none of them were allowed to ask any questions, except for that, I think it's like the VOA or the Voice of America. They were the only ones, I think, who could ask questions, because none of them signed the oath of loyalty. So, not really doing too well on the whole transparency side of things with that deal, and that does lead a lot of people to have a good bit of questions and scrutiny, which generally a lack of transparency always will lead to scrutiny. So I don't know if it was a narco-terrorist boat myself. It might not have been. And, it may have been, but everyone on board may have not been a narco-terrorist. That's that could very much be a possibility, considering the lack of information that we have to work with here. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $2 super chat from Parbate Potato. And thank you very much, Mr. Potato, for that support. He said, "For the clapped out Civic driving by your house."
Hey, for the clapped out boosted Civic. We love the clapped out boosted Civics. And I got to thank you so much for the support, because you're going to be able to help us to keep that little car around and have it traveling around, and liking each other. But still, big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Com Nemesis, who said, "How dare Turkey, a NATO member, buy so much oil from Russia? They're sabotaging our alliance." And what do you say?
I would agree. They are, but it then becomes a tricky deal because we can't kick them out. There's no way to kick anyone out of NATO. So then we just kind of have to, tell them, come on, follow us along, stop doing that, and then hope that they don't, that they eventually stop. There are some things that we can do to them and to kind of encourage them to stop, but do we want to do that? Maybe not, because then they could get pissed off and retaliate and then leave NATO, and then we would lose control of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles in a war scenario. So, kind of a really tricky situation. Turkey does Turkey things is the best way to explain it, but they ought to stop buying Russian oil. It would be greatly beneficial to our cause, and also I'm sure the Turks could get oil from the other Middle Eastern countries that they're actually trying to sphere build with, and that would help them to sphere build even farther, even if it is a little bit more expensive, possibly. Although I doubt it, because they're pretty close to all of the oil manufacturers, so it wouldn't really be hard for them to get cheap oil from really anywhere. But I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have one from William Lynch. And William said, what is Enforcer Matt take on preemptive strike? Would it not be justified by Russia's advance with their recon drones and sovereign airspace? If you're asking for my take on it, I would say personally a preemptive strike against Russia is nuts. Because while Russia has sent drones over NATO airspace, they haven't struck a NATO country yet with a missile. Excuse me, by the way. They haven't struck it with a missile, nor have they struck it with a warhead. So until that happens, then preemptive striking or any type of strikes on mainland Russia would be insane, in my personal opinion. That would be literally starting World War III and jumping way too far ahead of the escalation curve, if you ask me. So that's my take. But Enforcer, what do you say?
I'd have to agree with that. You have to work on an escalatory ladder, and that's pretty much jumping the whole ladder and getting to the roof. So I would say that that's probably not the best idea. We probably need to see that a smaller response is made to show that we're not going to allow that any farther. But going into straight strikes, that would be pretty harsh, especially considering the action that's being taken. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, I saw someone say, the issue with Venezuela is that it's always a crime to murder people who cannot defend themselves unless they are convicted in court and condemned to death. I don't think anyone in ISIS or anyone in Al-Qaeda or in Osama bin Laden were ever tried in court and condemned to death. I think we just sent in the SEAL team and blasted away Osama bin Laden and his gang in that compound in Pakistan. And I think we just drone strike, I think it was tens of thousands of people in the Middle East over the past 20 years without any court trials or processes, and everyone was on board with that. I mean, under international law, no one could really be against it. So, I would say that that would be the case for American citizens, but for terrorist groups, there really isn't any due process for them. But at the same time, we also have to have a little bit of white gloves when we're dealing with this whole situation, because there could be innocent civilians in the mix. And having a whole bunch of collateral like that, like blasting away a boat with 11 people on it, say 3 of them weren't involved in the cartel and they were just hopping a ride somewhere, we just killed 3 innocent people on that boat. That's not really a good move. And also that's going to start incensing people against the United States in the future and from these countries and elsewhere. And that's not really good to foster that sort of a mindset in people. So I would
also how's a terrorist group defined? Like, it's easy to say, oh, this group over here is a terrorist, that group over there's a terrorist, but there has to be some standard to who's defined as a terrorist group. The way I understand it is typically terrorist groups are groups that use violence against people that are non-combatants, and their main motivation is ideological. So that's typically what a terrorist group has been defined as in the past. So does a drug cartel that's mainly in the business of selling and transporting narcotics, does that fit the definition of a terrorist? Typically not under the standard definition, it doesn't. But that's the problem that some people have with it. While it's obviously horrific that we have if you want to call them narco terrorists, drug dealers, whatever you want to call them, that's terrible and it needs to be addressed. Calling someone a terrorist has really specific legal implications behind it. It basically gives the United States military a blank check to go and start basically wiping people out. Essentially, there's no restrictions on it when somebody's labeled a terrorist. So while the terrorist groups in the Middle East that were wiped out by drones with no due process, that was, in my opinion, justified. You can't just start labeling everybody a terrorist, because then you start just basically violating, due process of pretty much everything. But at the same time, though, we got to deal with the drug cartels. But I'm not sure if, just creating a new definition is responsible.
I would say that they kind of do fall under the definition of a terrorist organization because sure they peddle drugs, and the mafia all they did was in the prohibition peddle around booze. If we break it down to its most simple task, but they also ended up going around extorting people, killing people, and doing a whole bunch of other stuff, intimidating judges, bribing jurors, and such things along those lines, and that would start to fall under the aims of terrorism. I would say that the cartels certainly are because when any politician in Latin America goes against the cartels, they usually end up dead, shot in the back of a car on some street somewhere, or killed inside of their own house along with their family. So I would say that they
Yeah.
definitely fall under a terrorist group because of the additional actions they do on top of just, peddling drugs. The peddling drugs makes them the money, though, to go around and largely be terrorists elsewhere in every other way.
But yeah, but they're not really affecting us, though. I mean, like for example, the groups like Al Qaeda, they operate in the Middle East generally without messing with the domestic United States. Obviously, in 2001 that changed, and then we went over there and kicked their ass and pretty much wiped them out. But until then, though, they weren't really messing with the domestic United States heavily. They were doing some small things here and there, but they did the big one in 2001. Then we dealt with them. The cartel really doesn't do violence in mainland America. So while they are terrorists in their own country, they're not necessarily directly impacting the United States. They're only indirectly impacting us through the sale of drugs, which does have an impact. But I don't know if that's really a terrorist group because they're not really. Now, if the cartel was going across the border and attacking Americans in Texas, at that point, that's an invasion or a terrorist organization at that point. But there's not really a mass issue with violence like that right now this very second.
Yeah, I would say I'll be honest with y'all, folks. The whole issue with the drugs coming in the country is more so of a customs and border inspection sort of an issue than a terrorism issue, in my opinion. And I think it should be dealt with that way of just increasing the amount of border patrol forces on the border and also increasing the available numbers of Coast Guard cutters on patrol in the areas around the coasts of America, especially on the southern end. If you did that, you're pretty much dealing with the issue lock and step right there. You don't even have to go and bomb anyone down there. And they can eventually deal with it on their own, however they will. Because, a lot of people are going to say, oh, the cartels are going to exist forever. We just leave it to these South American countries. Nah, that's not the case. Because, what? If you lived back in the day, were you going to make the same argument about the mafia? Oh, the U.S. government's never going to deal with the mafia. They're always going to be around as thick as thieves as they are right now. We eventually dealt with them. I mean, it took about a hell 60 years, but we finally dealt with them generally and turned them into a very small and very underground sort of a criminal organization. And they'll eventually do that down there in the Latin Americas. I'm very sure.
But see though, the mafia, the mafia and the mobs in America, that was on our soil. So we had a direct reason to deal with that. But the cartel, while the cartel does operate on U.S. soil with distribution of narcotics, they're not here like conducting, attacks on people. The cartel know better than to do that. If they did that, they would literally have the entire U.S. government coming down on them, and they want to avoid that at all costs because it'll mess up their whole operation. Also, for example, the cartel generally doesn't attack people on the border because they know, once again, the U.S. is going to be on them heavy, and they don't want that heat. Because if I was the president and the cartel started attacking people in, like, for example, Texas, I wouldn't give a damn what the Mexican president said. I'd be like, we're sending people down there now and also aircraft, and we're going to start conducting airstrikes. You can step aside or else type deal. Like, you can step aside or you're just going to have to deal with it type situation. So, I mean, that's what I would personally do if I was the president. But at the same time, they're not doing that, though. It's like the cartel's not launching attacks in America, at least as far as we're aware.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, and if it was happening, I'm sure we know. I'm sure that'd be screamed from the mountaintops these days for sure. Um, it's a very weird way that we're going about dealing with this, honestly, folks. I don't like it. It's bizarre, and also on top of that, I just got to say, because someone's about to come in here and go, oh, so I guess you support selling drugs and killing people with fentanyl. Here's my thing. Those people who say that, they are perfectly fine with ending the war in Ukraine because not a human life and not a drop of blood can be shed, even if it is for the right cause. But in the Caribbean, they just want blood to be spilled left and right. They want the Caribbean to be soaked in blood to the point that the seas are red. It's like I don't really get the like different sort of logic there that these folks are having with that. Because it's like how in the hell are we taking glee? Like, you know, and once again getting back to this, there's no baseline moral here. We take like the US government at least takes glee at this point in killing people in the Caribbean. I mean, it doesn't matter if these people even may have been innocent or not. We just love killing them and we're going to keep on going according to the Secretary of Defense. But then when it comes to the war in Ukraine, lives are sacred and we just have to stop the killing. Even with Ukraine well justified in defending themselves from an armed invasion, even with them being in the right, another death just cannot be accepted. We just cannot have that anymore. But people in the Caribbean, I mean, hell, they're worthless. You know, just wipe them out every day. It's like, why in the world is that the case, you know? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me morally because it's applying two completely different moral ideas to the same situation, whether life has value or not. In the Caribbean, absolutely no value. In Ukraine, an endless amount of value. And, you know, and before someone says, well, I mean, the cartels are killing tens of thousands of people with fentanyl, and the war in Ukraine's killing everyone. I don't know if you noticed this, but the Russians are killing innocent Ukrainian civilians every day. Doesn't that give the Ukrainians a well-justified reason to keep on wiping out the Russian army and defend their territory, especially considering that on top of that, they're also being invaded and losing ground to the Russians? I mean, if you put it that way, the Ukrainians have all the reason in the world and the ability to have glee in wiping out Russian soldiers inside of Ukraine. Hell, they ought to be cheering it on every day off of that logic. But then we say that they shouldn't be doing that. But in the Caribbean, it's totally fine. It doesn't make any sense at all. And some people are saying that it's a racial thing. It's not a racial thing at all. It's the fact that this is our holy crusade in the Caribbean. And for some reason, the war in Ukraine doesn't make any sense. Because if you also notice, we are more than filled with glee to see Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran get bombed, or the Houthis here in America. Those people are of a different race, and we still are of glee to see the Israelis do anything, at least as far as the U.S. government position goes, to anyone in the region. But you know, with Ukraine, it's totally different than the logic that we apply everywhere else, which is kind of odd.
I see, yeah.
But with that, we are going to be getting on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Not Hideo Cruz, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much for that support, by the way, as well. They said the difference is they had guns. And with the AQ, if they were disarmed and laying on the ground bleeding, we still had to call med evacs or war crimes.
Well, you know, the cartel has guns. Like, they're not just like, you know, wandering around with no guns. I mean, the cartel is heavily armed. So using that sort of a objective claim, you know, you can obliterate the cartel. I mean, if you saw an AK in one of their hands or even a Glock, that would give you the same justification because technically they could defend themselves at that point. So, you know, I would say that would make sense if they were all unarmed and we guaranteed knew they were all unarmed. But going off of the proposition that these people are armed terrorists on these boats, at the same time, you know, devil's advocate here, they have the ability to defend themselves, much like these terrorists do. Because when we blew up Soleimani, we blew him up in a car. We didn't know if he had a gun on him or not. We just obliterated him in a drone strike right outside the Baghdad International Airport, and that was that. That was the end of the story, unarmed or not. The guy technically had no way to defend himself. You can't defend yourself from a drone with a pistol. So, you know, then that also begs the question, are they supposed to have a fair fight? Or are we supposed to send the U.S. Marshal with a Colt 45 down there and give them a showdown in the middle of town square to see if they get away or not? And I would say, probably not. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I see what you're getting at, but at the same time, the cartel, in my opinion, like as far as defining them as a terrorist organization, I would actually be in the camp that is very much justifiable. But how we're going about dealing with that, I don't know about that side of things. But anyways, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Marcel Kern FX, and he puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Marcel, for that 20 Canadian. And he said, any thoughts on the Diego Garcia base, power projection, and potential, etc.? Thanks, and enjoy the Costco chicken.
And thank you so much for the Costco chicken once again. And Diego Garcia is a great position, especially for air power projection within the area, because it's an island that's geographically central in the Indian Ocean. Perfect spot for us. We can conduct any air operations anywhere within the Indian Ocean area from Diego Garcia. Incredibly important strategically. So I would have to say, as far as answering that question, just because of its basing in the world, it is a great spot to power project from. The U.S. Air Force can always be present in the Indian Ocean as long as the British control the island and as long as the United States is allowed to operate off the island. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much once again for that incredible Costco chicken. And so with that, folks, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Kyle Padell. And Kyle said, any interest in ghost towns with enforcers? And yeah, I do. I find them pretty interesting personally. I haven't seen too many of them, though, but I'd like to see some more.
Oh yeah, I find them incredibly neat. We kind of almost got to the town of Mercer, which is outside of Salt Lake City, which is a ghost town being inhabited actually, by the way. But I would like to see some more ghost towns. They're very sporadic out here, but a lot of them are out here in the West. So I think we'll get a good chance of seeing one eventually someday. But my fix of looking at ghost towns is to watch Part-Time Explorer on YouTube. Great channel for ghost town history, by the way. He generally shows them off incredibly well and talks about their history. But I am interested in ghost towns. I find them to be very interesting, especially from the historical preservation kind of side of things. But with that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we are back into our live chat questions. And this live chat goes to Fire Guy. He said, what say you? Do you think POTUS address tomorrow is going to be the start of the military operations in Venezuela?
I don't know. I'm actually kind of doubting that because, you know, every day, every week for 90 days, he's been saying that we're about to strike him on land or about to do something to him on land or Maduro must go, and none of it happens. So I don't know. It might be about Russia tomorrow, or it might be about Europe, or it might be about China, or it might be about something internal, something domestic. So I'll be honest with you, I don't really know what it's going to be about. And also on top of that, it like they generally turn into being about everything, really, every time those happen. So I don't know. I'm kind of doubting that it's going to be about Venezuela, though. I could be wrong, but at this point, leaning any hopes on something finally being done with Venezuela is a tough sell these days. But with that, I hope that has addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20. Also, by the way, we were running overtime heavily.
Yeah.
But our next one here goes to Walter P., who puts in a 20. He said, I have Erdogan's son. Let's see here. Let's see. So sadly, Walter, I can't repeat that one because I don't know for a fact. I can't make any claims about any individual on the channel, but I do see what you said, though. But Enforcer, what say you?
Thank you for the support, Walter. And also, I can make a comment about that as well, because making a comment like that on air, someone might hear it, and then they could be litigious. So we generally try and avoid those sorts of comments because that could get us in some hot water. But a big thanks to you so much once again for the incredible support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $5 super chat from Andrew Honeycutt. And Andrew said, are we dangerously close to becoming the thing that we despise? And are we giving up geopolitical power for the sake of ego? And where do we go from here?
I would say that to a part we are, and it's not a good thing. We need to always prioritize the interests of the nation and of the citizenry, which are the country. And so I'd say where we go from here, there isn't really much of a place to go, really, at least for now. Kind of have to wait it out for 3 years, and then when everyone gets around to picking another leader, hopefully they'll pick one that isn't really that egotistical. It doesn't really matter. Like, and I got to say this, folks, it doesn't matter what party. I'm not one of those people who are like, hey, by the way, you have to vote this way or you're the devil. You can vote either way. You just have to vote in the primaries for good candidates first, and then when you get to the final presidential election, you have to pick the best of the two options. It doesn't really matter which party. It just matters which one seems the best put together with the best ideas. But that's generally what I would say at this point. Or, you know, you can kind of wait for the midterms either way. But at this point, everything's kind of locked in place until another election comes around. So at the moment, we just kind of got to wait the whole thing out and just keep watching what happens. But a big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, folks, due to us going overtime, we're going to be getting 3 more live chats, and then we're going to be rounding out this thing for the night. And so we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Mark McKernan, who said, how many shadow tankers are there?
I do not know the exact number, and I don't think anyone knows, but there are some lists out there, and I think that some of the list gets up into the mid-100s or so. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Longtime Lurker, who said, have you guys heard that Russia is selling off all their gold reserves?
Yeah, actually, we covered that, I think, about a week and a half ago. And they're actually selling it off to the Russian oligarchs or to foreign countries because it's, funnily enough, not sanctioned. That's one of the few things that isn't sanctioned. And they're trying to find some way to raise money for the Russian government to keep working off of, at least in the here and now. So we did hear about that. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is the Sunken Grave, who said Ukraine goes after the shadow tankers, and how long before Russia goes after commercial ships going into Odessa?
And can you reread that one again?
They said Ukraine goes after those shadow tankers. How long before Russia goes after commercial ships going into Odessa?
Oh, they've already been doing that for years, actually. Loads of commercial ships trying to get into Odessa have been hit numerous times over at least just the past 2 years by Russian attacks. So I'd actually have to say that we don't have to wait at all. We are already living in that reality. You best start believing in ghost stories. You're in one. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And believe it or not, folks, 3 hours and 36 minutes into this show, it's finally coming to an end. I've got to say, a massive thanks to all of y'all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run the stream for all of y'all tonight on behalf of Enforcer Man and me. We have had a peak viewership of 12,000 people tonight, and a total viewership of 72,000 people over the course of the stream. We are greatly honored and massively appreciative of so many of y'all enjoying this channel, and of course, considering it to be your primary source of news. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is enough news in the middle of the day, which hopefully there will be, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that short war video. And so, with that in mind, folks, it's time for us to round this thing on out. We will see you all tomorrow. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava. Long live the Least Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight. And we will see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly War News stream, and midday tomorrow for that short war video if there is enough news to cover. And of course, if it turns out that announcement is a big one tomorrow from the United States, we might be running an emergency stream to cover the Venezuela situation if that is breaking out. But don't hold out hopes on it because it's liable to be something that could be a nothing burger. We'll have to wait and see. But with that, thank you all once again, and Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.